Let's get sweaty.
Hello, and welcome to the Shenmue Dojo Show, Episode 3. I'm James Brown, and I'm joined, as always, by interview extraordinaire Matthew Oliver. How's it going,
Thanks.
Matt?
Yeah, thanks for that nice intro there. How's it going, James?
Yeah, all good, man. Nice weather here today. I don't know if it's the same your end, but nice sunny day for change.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I actually got out into the garden for the first time this year.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, we just been for a little walk, actually. Just found a place on my phone using Google Maps and went for a little walk through some woods. My wife, daughter, and 3 dogs. It's a bit chaotic, but yeah, it was nice for a change. Get back in the outside,
Yeah,
outdoors.
definitely. Well worth doing.
Okay, excellent. Well, for this episode, we wanted to take a thorough analysis of Shenmue 3, basically the game as a whole, and a bit of a deep dive into the story. So I've personally completed the game fully twice now, I'd say, and I've played bits and pieces here and there. I believe you've completed the game about 4 times. Is that right, Matt?
Yeah, 4 times and sort of played bits and pieces, either for video capture or on stream here or there.
Oh yeah, well, you did all those bloody screenshots for the media section, didn't you? Take a picture of all the in-game
Oh,
items and stuff. So yeah, it's a little bit of a plug there. If you want to head over to the shenmuedojo.com and hit up the media section, the Shenmue 3 section of the media section, and there's a ton of bits and pieces that Matt's put together there, taking screenshots of every in-game item, like I say, all the backup rewards and Choba-chans and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so hopefully between us we'll be able to hold a decent enough discussion on each of the scenes throughout the game. I figured what we could do is work through a couple of guides to follow the game. We're going to start with Bailu Village, of course, and depending on how long this episode runs for, or if there becomes a natural point to stop, we might break it up into 2 parts. But you'll know what we did by the name of the title of this episode, if we break it up into 2 parts or not. But before we get into all of that, we're going to run through some of the more recent Shenmue news since the last episode. And first up, we've actually had a random piece of merch that's just appeared out of nowhere, really. But it's basically the original limited run games Shenmue 3 vinyl record soundtrack, the curated one. But this time it's in a fluorescent glow in the dark green, apparently. So this is available on a French website called Just for Games, and I don't believe that they actually ship to the UK because I've had to figure out an alternative way of ordering this, but it is available. It's €54.99, so quite pricey, really. Can't remember the price of the limited run games release, but if you're a Shenmue collector like we are, and you want to get all the different variants or whatever, this is a green fluorescent version of that curated soundtrack there. Exactly the same, all the same sort of songs and stuff. And we'll put the link for that particular record in the show notes and description wherever you're viewing this from. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'll put the link in the description. Second, we've had quite a lot of tweets from user Debuita_JP, who's got basically a Twitter account there. I don't know if it's an actual shop on Debuita Street. Do you know, Matt, if it's a shop or?
I don't know. I'm not sure, or whether it's one of the public service sectors or something like that are running it. I don't know, but they were selling a very nice item, which I'm sure you'll go into in a second.
Yeah, well, just got the Twitter bio up here actually. So what they've got, they're selling. It's basically like an amulet. If you remember, especially from Shenmue 1, at the end of the game when Nozomi gives Ryo that amulet. Apparently, it's kind of like a yearly tradition which grants whoever's given this amulet, good luck, basically. And this Debuita account that's popped up is basically they're selling these amulets that they specially made for this. Basically it says it's a project to create a new amulet of Yokosuka Shinjigami. Suwadai Shrine cross Dobuita Dori with members of the Dobuita Dori Honmachi Youth Association and young volunteers in the shopping district. So it sounds like it's kind of like a nice youth project here. It says, be positive in difficult times, like Dobuita Street, a symbol of post-war reconstruction. In cooperation with shrines and towns, we will create amulets that are loved by the community, and the profits will go to projects that will energize the community. Yeah, so it sounds like a good, kind of like a good deed sort of thing. They're taking sales of this amulet and putting it back into the community. So if obviously you're a fan of Shenmue like we are, and you've always wanted to go on that Shenmue pilgrimage to Dobuita Street or Yokosuka as a whole, basically these are selling amulets that are actually from Dobuita Street, and the organisation there have created these especially, and I think it does actually, well, I don't know if the blue one that we've got says Dobuita on it, but it definitely says Yokosuka on it. And on the reverse, there's like a dragon, I believe,
Yeah,
like a
that's
dragon
right.
with, it says good luck. There's like a Torii Gate and Mount Fuji in the background. It's really nice little item if you're a Shenmue fan and you've always wanted an amulet from Nozomi. There's a kind of like a recreation amulet thing here, which is really cool to get. And I believe they're also selling a black version. And I've heard that there's going to be a third version as well, which is like a set of 3 basically in the end. But you can pick up the blue one right now, and the black one is a pre-order, I believe. Again, we'll put the link in the show notes and the description if you want to go off and pick yourself one of them up. Next, we've got... I want to talk a bit about Lemon Haze's project. Lemon Haze and his team have... don't know if you've been keeping up with Shenmue news recently, but there's been... It's picked up quite a lot of steam, actually, really, hasn't it? It's a project called Dragon and Phoenix Collection, and it's basically going to take your Shenmue 1 and 2 game that you've got on your PC, your Steam, wherever, and up-res it to Unreal 4, believe it or not. So obviously Shenmue 3 is using the Unreal 4 engine, and what Lemonade and his team have done is basically some sort of magic wizardry and popped out Shenmue 1 and 2 in Unreal 4 engine, and it's obviously taken advantage of all the latest graphics and weather effects, ray tracing, even those sort of things. And he's posted some screenshots that you can view on the Dojo forums, and again, we'll put the link to those screenshots in the description. But they just look incredible, don't they, Matt?
Yeah, it's a hell of a project, hell of an undertaking.
Totally.
But the screenshots that have been shown publicly are absolutely fantastic, and it's picked up some traction as you've been saying, James. I mean, it ended up on IGN,
exactly,
of all places. So there's a wider interest in how this project sort of goes on and matures and where it goes from here. I mean, there's no solid release date yet, but I mean, to be fair, they're all people with their own jobs and lives, so I can completely understand that. But the progress they've made so far is nothing short of fantastic, quite honestly.
Yeah, and there's some definite excitement towards it that, you know, it's evident by the people's reactions to the screenshots and stuff. You know, it's like I say, IGN and other websites have even noticed how great of a project this looks. So if you want to keep tabs on that, you can follow the devlogs, and there's a news post actually on the front page of the Dojo main site that will link you to the devlog. It's on the forums, and also there's a new Twitter account for the project, which is at Shenmue C, and it's basically going to provide updates throughout for this Shenmue Dragon Phoenix Collection project. So if you remember last episode when we were talking about Shenmue 3's Kickstarter, did actually make a little bit of a mistake at one point by suggesting that it was George Kitchen who was the backer NPC and also the owner of one of the food vendor stalls in Niaowu, when it was actually Joe Kitchen. So sorry guys for the mix-up, but to be fair, you are twins and you all look alike. So anyways, talking about the Kitchen Brothers, both of them this time, they've been hard at work on some incredible Shenmue music and also videos to go along with them, which again we'll link, you can find on YouTube. And the videos themselves are actually pretty insane to me, because the editing that's gone into them to make them look like it's part of gameplay. I did ask actually if they'd modded the game or it was just editing, and I think it was Joe that replied and said that it was literally just video editing that made it look like they managed to somehow get into the game files and get characters to do some of the things they wanted to do for the to go along with the music kind of thing. But the music itself, they've actually used some of the original equipment and instruments that the Shenmue music composers used at obviously back in 1998 or 1999, whenever they were creating the music for Shenmue. So that is why the music that they've created, the Kitchen Brothers have created, actually sounds really professional. It sounds pretty much like Shenmue music that has been unearthed in 2021. It's it's that closely resembles the original music and soundtrack, and that's all in part to the dedication of the Kitchen Brothers, and obviously the equipment that they've used to create this being the same as what they used back in the day. So at some point after we finish this news, we've got quite a lot of news to run through here, but we are going to play some of their music as well, just so you can have an opportunity to hear that firsthand. And talking about other fan creating music people, Richard Cartledge has again been cranking out music, and he's made some incredible recreations of some of Shenmue's iconic music, which you can check out on his YouTube channel. He seems to be cranking about 5 out a week at the moment. He's he's going ham really, and again we'll play a song or two from him as well in this episode. Some great music, and I think he's actually working with Lemon Haze now on the Phoenix and Dragon project. So that'll be interesting to see some of the fresh takes on Shenmue's original music that Richard Cartledge is actually providing. Finally, one other fan that always puts out some incredible Shenmue related music is Rio X, who obviously he's had an awesome music CD that's just come with Shenmue World Issue 1, the unofficial fan magazine created by yours truly, which has now finally all been shipped off to all the Kickstarter backers. It was a crazy long process, and pretty much each individual magazine shipment roughly took the best part of about 10 minutes. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you times that by about 650 orders, and that was like a month's worth of my own free time in the evenings, from literally after putting my daughter to bed, and the time in between that to go in bed myself. So we're finally there now, and it's a huge weight and commitment that's off my mind. So I'm going to take a couple of months now, I think, to get back into gaming and some other Shenmue projects, I think, before getting back to the magazine and starting work on issue 2. But for everyone that has backed issue 1, I'm really pleased. They've already started to hit people's hands, and generally everyone's loved what they've received so far. I think when people back the project, they didn't fully realise the quality of the item that I wanted to go for. So I think most people have been pleasantly surprised by it all, and it's super heartwarming to hear everyone's love and feedback on the project. It's been really rewarding for myself. But on Matt's side of things, obviously he's been doing his interview series, and he's cranked out a few more awesome interviews himself over the past month or so since the last episode. And I mean, Matt, did you want to talk us through some of the people that you spoke to, and maybe what listeners can expect if they want to go check these out for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, sort of the most recent one that I've put out is an hour-and-a-half interview with Michael Huber, of all people. He was nothing but a pleasure to interview, and actually he's just a fan like us at the end of the day, and it turned into an hour-and-a-half Shenmue nerd out more than anything else, with some sort of structured questions in there around sort of thoughts around Shenmue 3, the future of the series, the anime. I'll be honest, when I say most of my questions I just binned off.
Yeah.
and just we just went with it, and it was an absolute pleasure to interview him. So yeah, check that out. The link will be in the description.
Yeah. What I did, it's also be in the podcast feed as well, but what I did pick up from that interview with Michael Huber was just the, some of the passion, and as you were running through the games, because you kind of took them game by game and just discussed like some of the major points from each of the games. It was just awesome, really, to experience Huber's reactions to certain scenes and his thoughts and stuff. So I think you did a really good job especially like if you had questions for him and then ended up dropping them to just get into that sort of passionate Shenmue nerd out.
Yeah, and I think he's very much like, I think, the rest of the community in terms of what he wants to see moving forward with the Shenmue 4 and the anime. He's really excited for the anime, actually. It's one thing that we keep talking about. It's a bit of a dark horse at the moment, more than anything else. But he seemed really, really amped up for it. And we're going to get him back when the anime's aired to talk about it and go through it and compare it to the games and see what's been changed, see what's been added, what's different, and whether it's better or worse or anywhere in between. We'll see.
That's great. And was there other interviews you've done as well? I feel like you've got another one at least.
I've recorded another one, which is due to go live on March the 13th. I think it's 9 o'clock UK time. It will go live. It's with Mike Reinhardt, who was the lead beta tester for Shenmue 1 at Sega America at the time.
Okay.
So we talked through the beta testing process for Shenmue 1, any sort of bugs that they found, the scale of the project, meeting Yu Suzuki, and also a little bit about sort of how it compares to testing now. He doesn't work in testing anymore. He works in marketing, and he talks a little bit about how Shenmue steered his career that way, actually, as well. So that's released on March the 13th.
Cool. That sounds interesting. And I don't know if we did talk about Andrew Dickinson, did we, last episode? I don't know.
I don't think we did, but
there's another one as well.
Yeah, for anybody who may have missed this one as well, Andrew Dickinson is part of Dreamcast Junkyard. He's part of Crossplayers podcast, very much into the Dreamcast retro scene at the moment. And we did a hour and a half sit down interview talking about Shenmue, finding Shenmue, his love for Shenmue, and all the things in between.
Yeah, well, he does that Dreamcast Years podcast as well, and he's done the Dreamcast Years books. Well, Year 1 Dreamcast, and his upcoming book is Year 2 of the Dreamcast, and those books are really cool. They just go through, obviously, those years of the Dreamcast's time in Europe, I believe, and obviously the games that were released throughout that year period. So Year 2 is pretty exciting, obviously, for obvious reasons, because that's when Shenmue was released in Europe in Dreamcast Year 2. So I'm looking forward to seeing the Shenmue part of that book. Talking about that, actually, Limited Run Games have sort of released like a little leaflet magazine thing they've been sending out with some of the recent Sega sort of orders, like Space Channel 5 VR and possibly Streets of Rage, and also the upcoming Panzer Dragoon remake, at least for the PS4. I think the physical for the Switch has already been shipped, basically. But I've actually got the little magazine here that's got a nice little sort of like it's kind of like a discussion with Yu Suzuki. It's not really an interview though, is it really? What would you say it is? It's kind of like
it's a snippet, isn't it, of just a little insight into Yu Suzuki and Shenmue, the process around Shenmue 3 and the future of the series.
I'll just crank it out quick because it's quite a short little interview thing anyway, but it says, for Yu Suzuki, the third time is the charm. The Bambi and Shenmue continuing the Dreamcast grounded saga in the modern era. Sega Shenmue debuted on the Dreamcast in the final days of 1999, meaning the series is now older than Ryo Hazuki himself, the team protagonist, who undertakes an epic journey to learn the truth behind the murder of his father. Time has never deterred the series' visionary Yu Suzuki, who has carried the torch for the series since the 2001 release of Shenmue 2. About 5 years after Shenmue 2 was released, there was a rise in the number of people asking when a sequel would come out, he says. Community sites were created gathering fans for more than a dozen years. Those voices of support were always there for me. Though Suzuki never gave up on his dream of continuing Ryo's story, putting a plan into action presented many logistical challenges, not least of which being Sega's complete reconstructuring following the Dreamcast retirement, meaning Suzuki would need to forge ahead on his own. An open-world epic, Shenmue was truly cutting-edge gaming experience when it first arrived. Fans would expect nothing less for follow-up, nor would Suzuki want to disappoint them. I agonised over how to secure the sizable budget it would require to get a third game made, he admits, but I was generally moved by all the fans who wanted the Shenmue story to go on, even if it was in the form of a novel or anime. Ultimately, Shenmue 3 was able to stick to video game form, including a physical release by Limited Run Games, thanks to a highly successful Kickstarter campaign. Still, developer YSNet found itself working with a tighter budget than the first game enjoyed. Suzuki says his approach for maintaining an authentic Shenmue feel within these constraints was to keep his focus down to earth. I strive to put conversation and everyday life into the forefront, he says. Chinese culture and the Japanese way of thinking are just some of the things that one can engage and become familiar with. Along with this, I believe that having instilled my own true feelings, ideas, and experiences into China, into my work, has led to making the world of Shenmue unique. While Shenmue 3 is a faithful continuation of Ryo's story, Suzuki felt it necessary to reshuffle his original plans for the narrative to accommodate the series' new form. The original story spans 11 chapters, he says, but if I kept it at a chapter per game, the Shenmue series would not be completed in my lifetime. I reworked the story to incorporate content from multiple chapters. Still, Shenmue 3 is far from the tale's end, and Suzuki vows to see it through. As long as the fans are there, I know I will not give up on making the Shenmue sequels. So yeah, I don't think he's got any concerns about the fans going away at the moment anyway, Matt, do you think?
No, and actually, I think it's a funny old thing, isn't it? When obviously we're over a year outside the release of Shenmue 3, and I think now fans are coming back into the sort of the tweetathons. There's a real buzz around the community at the moment with all the projects that are going on. I think actually we're in a really good place. We're in a really, really good place as a community now, and it's just pushing that message home.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know back from when I spoke to Cedric that they're pitching Shenmue 4. We don't know what's come of that. They may not have happened, but we just need to be ramming that message home now. The whole hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4 community-wide tweetathon on the 4th of every month. Join in.
Yep, exactly. And obviously we've got the anime to look forward to as well. So as long as the fans keep the back in, you've just heard it there as well, Suzuki's going to try and do his best to keep making Shenmue content, games, anime, whatever, basically. So back into the news a little bit now. So if anyone missed it, Friday just gone, which was the 26th of February, myself and Matt did a very special 2-hour stream on behalf of Team Radio Sega for the support of Game Blast and the charity Special Effect. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about what this charity does?
Yeah, so Special Effect, for anybody who hasn't come across them, are a UK-based charity. And what they do is they augment video game controllers, equipment, etc. for physically disabled adults, young people, children. So they can access video games. They can play games with their feet, their mouth, even using eye gaze technology. I'm a firm believer that games should be accessible by anybody. We should all be able to enjoy video games if we want to. And this charity provide that gateway to these people that just need a bit of extra help to access their video games. And watching some of the videos of the equipment they've put together, it's mind blowing actually how clever and how innovative this equipment is. It's such a good worthy cause, and we had a target within our team. We all had like a set target to put up. Ours was £100, and we absolutely smashed that. As of recording right now, we're at £181.75 towards the cause, and the whole team, Radio Sega, is at about £1,400 thus far. And
That's amazing.
There's a few hours to go yet.
Yeah, that is amazing, isn't it? Really, just I think as a whole, not just Radio Sega, but everyone that's put out this content for Gamer Blast, have the last thing I saw, I think on Twitter was like, I think they've raised about £150,000 altogether. So it's been it's very special to be a part of that and have some sort of Shenmue backing behind that charity, and some of the Shenmue fans giving us some donations on that night. We only did like a 2-hour stream, but we had some great support there, and I hope that Special Effect continue to provide all this amazing equipment to less able people, to allow them to play games and enjoy games. It's really truly special. So moving on from that, we've got some of the English voice actors have started obviously doing streams playing Shenmue and discussion, sort of going back into behind the scenes history and some of the memories that they had working on the original games. Corey Marshall being probably the major contributor at the moment. He's cranking out weekly streams, if not 2 a week, 2 or 3 a week even, playing Shenmue. He also plays Yakuza, and I think he's recently been playing Alien Isolation as well. But his Shenmue streams are great, really. I think he's played through all 3 games, or he might still be in the process of Shenmue 3. But it's just great to hear that kind of like commentary alongside the game, thinking back to some of the experiences he had working on the games back in the day, providing the voice, obviously, of Ryo Hazuki. But we've also had streams from Lizzle Wilkerson, who was the voice of Shuing and Joy, amongst other people in Shenmue 2 at least. Her streams have been great as well. She's been talking to people like Paul Lucas, and I think even Eric Calso has been involved in some of these streams here and there. So the best thing to do, if you want to keep tabs on that, rather than, you can go try and hunt down Corey's socials and Lizzle's socials, etc. Paul Lucas, I think, has some. I'm not sure on Eric Calso. But if you want to follow the dojo, obviously, on our socials, and we'll let you know when their streams actually are, when they go live as well. But it's really cool to see these original voice actors streaming Shenmue, and some really interesting behind the scenes. Like I say, some memories from these awesome cast members. We've had some more blog posts from both PhantomRiverstone.com and Shenmusings. Who, if you don't know who Shenmusings is, it's a guy called Stuart Peacock. You may also recognise his name as Miles Prower on the dojo forums. He's recently started getting back into blog posting. But Phantom Riverstone side of things, Switch, he's done a great post on Christmas and New Year and the original Shenmue. There's some interesting information on the street signs that change over these periods in the game, and obviously the kimonos that a few of the female characters wear on this time of the year. He's also done a nice interview with Mappy, who did that Japanese fan manga book that we talked about a few months back. And just a couple of extra posts with discoveries kind of relating to the Dragon and Phoenix collection project we just spoke about, with a mini-map that was discovered that would have been used in the harbour area of Shenmue 1, and also some leftover UI files that could potentially link back to the Sega Saturn days. So some great posts that you can find right now over on PhantomRiverstone.com. And on shenmusings.wordpress.com, you can find a couple of new blog posts from Stuart Peacock, who discovers basically the names of the Blue Spiders and the Red Snakes, those 2 gangs that are in Shenmue 3, of which we have never actually told their names. So they are very interesting blog posts to see how Stuart kind of figured out exactly who they are. Right, so I would say that's all the news for this episode, unless you've got anything else to add, Matt.
No, that's everything I can see. I mean, there's a lot going on in the community, actually. It just goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, that there's a buzz now and lots of good community projects going. So, yeah, let's just keep it up.
Yeah, so, I mean, if we did miss anyone, we're sorry. We tried to do as much there, cram as much of the news in there as possible, and like Matt says, there's always stuff going on, so just keep an eye out on all the social media platforms, and you'll see a ton of Shenmue content really cranking out all the time. So let's have a quick break, and we're going to play a song from the aforementioned Kitchen Brothers. So here's a lovely piece that went with an incredible video. I highly recommend you check this one out, and it's called Hisaka-san's Theme. Welcome back. That was Hisaka-san's theme from the Kitchen Brothers. Just truly amazing piece of music there. Just keep an eye out on Kitchen Brothers. They've got a YouTube channel, and they seem to be pushing out some of these great pieces of music quite often. So just keep an eye on that. So let's finally get straight into the main focus topic for this episode. So as mentioned earlier, we're going to attempt to break up Shenmue 3 as a whole. I'm going to start with Bailu Village. So I've got two guides up here opened. We've got one from Reela over on Game FAQs, which seems to be a little bit more in depth. So hopefully this should allow us to bring up some memories from these parts of the game and try and discuss those certain parts of the story and the cutscenes, etc. And the other guide I'm using is Game of Guides, which it's a guide with some pretty decent screenshots actually from a guy called Kane, and hopefully that'll just help us prompt some memories as well. So let's get into it. So Shenmue 3, first time, starts up, loads up. You've got all obviously your options to select new game, continue, load game, etc. But if you select that new game option, it's going to load into, finally, after all these years, the cave sequence again. And it's basically a recreation of the end of Shenmue 2's cave sequence. Just bits cut out here and there, like the floating sword and that sort of stuff. But it's quite a nice, very nice graphics anyway, graphical new stone pit that they've recreated there with Ryo and Shenhua kind of discovering the two large stone carvings of the mirrors. And I think it was quite a nice little opening to the game, actually. What do you think?
Yeah, I did. I quite liked it. It's I'm trying to think of the word for it. You've been waiting 18 years for this, and it was always when you hit that X button or A button, depending on what you're playing on, and you get the cave sequence again. I thought it was quite a tasteful way to do it, actually, because it's just a nice little callback to where we've come from. Actually, that he had been, for sort of figuratively speaking, stuck in a cave for 18 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very well done. It was very well presented. Obviously, as you say, there was some notable exceptions like the floating sword, or in the case of Shenmue 2, it was more like a He-Man sword. But
Yeah, exactly. It was a massive sword, wasn't it?
But they downscaled it for Shenmue 3. But yeah, very well done. Quite happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a little bit of a tidbit on why they decided to downscale the sword, basically. I mean, in Yu Suzuki's original plan, according to him himself, he always wanted it to be a dagger. It wasn't meant to be like a huge sword. It was always meant to be a little dagger. But obviously, because kind of things were heating up with the Dreamcast, it was getting cancelled, and they were really wanted to put a lot into the end of Shenmue 2 just to go out with a bang, basically. And I think they took a few liberties and exceptions there and created this huge sword and this whole masterpiece. It kind of was like a really, it was an insane ending to the game, really, after what you just encountered. Just walking through the forest, basically, with Shenmue for 2 hours, just this insane ending to the game that kept us wanting for so long. And obviously, it was probably a little bit more enthusiastic than Yu Suzuki originally intended. Obviously, it was just meant to be a little dagger, but apparently that's the reason why it is a dagger in Shenmue 3, because he's gone back to his kind of original plan, I guess, in that situation, which I'd rather have kept things consistent, if I'm being honest. I'd rather it have been the same sort of size sword, because it just doesn't really kind of make sense when you go from one game to the next, but it's not really anything too detracting from the experience as a whole. So, reading the guide here, so Shenmue 3 picks up immediately after the ending of Shenmue 2. Ryo and Shenhua are in the quarry, where they discovered a magical floating sword and two gigantic carvings on the wall depicting the exact images found on the Dragon Phoenix mirrors. It's another thing, actually. I don't know if it's in both the English and Japanese translations, but they started using the word quarry rather than stone pit. Obviously, we've always called it the stone pit since the Dreamcast days. I'm not sure if that was another just translation thing, or it was always meant to be a quarry.
Yeah, it could be a translation error or change, to be fair. I mean, it's basically one and the same thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that's true. It's basically the same. It's just weird hearing them talking they were calling it the Stone Pit before, and now they're calling it the Quarry. But fair enough. So as you gain control of Rio, he's walking down a path towards Bailu Village with Shenhua. So that's kind of just after the end of the scene there with the big mirrors. There's kind of a transition where Rio and Shenhua are looking at each other, and it transitions basically from the cave to outside, and they're still kind of looking at each other, which I did think was a little bit wonky at the time, but it does work. It works fine. And obviously now they're outside, heading down this path towards Bailu Village, and it's just a good reflection of the kind of the graphics of the environments. Obviously, it transitions from this beautiful cave, and suddenly you're outside, and it's bright, colourful. You can see the scenery, the environments around Rio and Shenhua are pretty spectacular, to be fair, considering the budget and the constraints that we talked about earlier. So it says, move forward until you reach the bridge, and a cinematic will play where you are introduced to the gatekeepers of Bailu.
You've got Leo and Sharon are the two.
So obviously they're guarding the bridge across to Bailu Village itself. That's called the Verdant Bridge, and Rio does. He mentions to Shenhua, like, are they always there? Is this bridge always need protecting? And Shenhua kind of replies saying that no, obviously these thugs that the two gatekeepers just spoke about, they've been attacking the village and stuff, so that's why they're on guard at the moment. They're not always usually there, because Bailu Village it's always been a safe village until obviously this stuff that's happened, which obviously we know is basically Landian, as thugs and chi men or whatever. They're basically in search of Rio's mirror, which he still holds at the moment. He's still holding the Phoenix, which kind of ties into the prophecy there, the one who holds the Phoenix. And basically they've kind of ransacked the village in search of this mirror. So that's why there's gatekeepers at the Verdant Bridge. When you regain control of Rio, continue forward until you reach the village square. So we've passed Mr. Tauget's store, and we've basically been following Shenhua into the village square. And I think there's quite a nice scene actually with what's that guy's name? The martial arts guy. I don't know what his name is.
Su Jiang or something. It's Mr. Su, isn't
Mr. Su, is it?
He's the big dude training Tai Chi.
Yeah, he's teaching the children Tai Chi or former martial arts there, and there's a little scene just saying hi to that guy. But then Shenhua goes off on her own to investigate in a nearby settlement, and Rio's left to his own devices, basically walking around the village square, and he's tasked to ask these residents if anyone's seen Shenhua's father, Mr. Yuan, who's obviously at the end of Shenmue 2, he leaves the letter there. That's Shenhua is expecting to see a father working in the stone pit, but obviously something that we don't know about at this point, where he's gone missing, and he's just left a note for Shenhua. So in the village, they're basically just asking if anyone's seen Mr. Yuan.
It's an interesting point, actually, when you're sort of going through the village in that initial stage. Obviously, we know Mr. Yuan has gone missing, but what we don't sort of think about, I suppose, the first sort of thinking is, obviously, when you land in Guilin, it takes you a couple of days to get there. So him going missing, the letter being put there, has happened within a sort of 2-3 day period, because the guards at the gate, or the bridge rather, they make a reference to that, saying a couple of thugs tore through here a couple of days ago.
Right.
So that's all been going on as Rio has been getting towards Bailu Village itself. So it's a nice little link there as to things weren't actually all okay. So they seemed okay when Shenhua left to go, and I can't remember what she was doing when she left in Shenmue 2 to go that way. And then obviously she met Rio, but then all this is kicked off while they've been on their way back to the village. So it's quite an interesting tidbit, actually.
Yeah, and it is interesting when you think of the prophecy and stuff. It's kind of it's fate, basically, isn't it? What they say, how Shenhua has met Rio, and this obviously been foretold for all these years in the village. The poem's been in the village for centuries, I believe, from what we're told in the game. So it's really interesting to see all this start coming together. When you start Shenmue 1, none of this is apparent, is it really? You're just thinking it's a realistic take on Japan, and a guy going around hunting his father's killer. But when you get to Shenmue 2 and now Shenmue 3, all this sort of mystery, it really presents itself. And to the player, it's a complete contrast from Shenmue 1, basically. All these little things that you probably weren't expecting going into the series. It just really adds that extra layer to the story, and I think it's pretty cool, to be honest.
Yeah, you just summed it up quite nicely there, actually, in terms of how it's now starting to come together. I mean, we'll talk about it more as we go through, won't we? But those puzzle pieces are starting to fill in now.
Yeah, so it says here actually, Su Xiong is the Abyss Man instructing the children in martial arts. Nice choice of words here. So behind him is a path that's leading up to two houses. The one on the left is Lynn's house, who's the little girl that she's kind of drawing into the dirt, isn't she, when Rio meets her at the start. And I don't know if this is right, actually, because I feel like you may have to go to the old lady who's doing the beating on the cloth or whatever for this to trigger.
You do. You have to go and wander over to Elder Yed's house.
That's it.
And
Yeah.
it triggers that cutscene where she's beating the medicine, completely blanks Rio.
Yeah, she doesn't say a word, does she? But I think she is blind after all. But Rio does talk to her, and she doesn't reply.
And it's synonymous, actually, with how the village are with him. Bear in mind, Shenhua has walked off. She's gone somewhere else. Rio is an outsider here.
He looks like a strange person, I bet, to them, because they've, if anything like Shenhua, they've never actually been outside of the village. So this is the first, potential Japanese person to arrive in the village. Barring the thugs, whatever.
And some of them probably you got to consider. I mean, a WoW trained there, so they may have been children. They may not remember that it might be their first sight of a foreigner.
That's very true, actually. About you, we'll get into a bit later, but yeah, depends. Maybe some of the old people we do get a scene later. We'll discuss where someone actually confuses Rio for a WoW. So I wonder what these people actually feel about Rio being in the village.
They're cold towards him, aren't they? I mean, you go around.
Some of them are, especially the younger people, aren't they?
You start sort of talking to them and go, "I'm not interested in talking to you," and they're just a bit cold, and they're obviously wary of him. I mean, bearing in mind as well that we know that some thugs have torn through the village.
That could be another reason why. Yeah,
you're going to be a bit wary anyway, but
when he's backed by Shenhua, they're a lot nicer to him, aren't they?
They are. But they just start off very, very cold, which is you would be. This is a new person. You haven't. The village is remote. I mean, we'll talk about how remote it is in Shenmue 3 to what I think we assumed we might get later. Yeah. But it's a remote village. Travelers don't come through very often, and you've got this random traveler turning up asking all these questions. You're not going to be particularly friendly.
So it says that then you wait for Lynn to come, and obviously when she is starting to draw on the ground in front of her house, move close to her to initiate a cinematic, and she'll tell you that her father will be home at around 7 p.m. Her father is a stonemason, isn't he? So
yeah.
I think that's why we're just obviously investigating some of the stonemason sort of people to see if they know where Mr. Yuan is, basically. So it says you can either walk around or talk to other people to wait until 7 p.m. Okay, so at 7 p.m., the sun goes down and gets dark outside. The typical Shenmue transitions into nighttime. And you're forced to return to Shenhua's house 2 hours later. So, like at 9 o'clock every day, Rio's forced to return to Shenhua's house. So, in front of Lynn's house, knock on the door, and Lynn's father will answer. Lynn's father, Zhao Kaiji, he'll talk to you, and you'll learn about the thugs that ransacked his house. So, yeah, if this is the scene I'm thinking of, when you enter, his house is all pretty much smashed up.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think Lynn's kind of hiding behind her father. She's quite friendly, actually, to Rio at the start, really, considering they've obviously had thugs in the house and smashed the place up, looking for the mirror.
Yeah, she is. And when you first speak to her, she's sat in the dirt, and Rio does, it sounds silly, but he gets on a knee to talk to her. which is always it's a bit more endearing, I think, as well. And actually, the scene was a trailer used at Magic Kyoto just
Yeah, I
before
remember that
release,
actually.
wasn't it?
Yeah,
So it's quite a nice little scene, actually. But yeah, you say you walk into the house, it's smashed up, and he says his thugs came by and basically tore up his house, and then you end up back at Shenhua's house, don't you?
and it says the next day, Shenhua will walk with Ryo back to the village, and this time she'll stay with you as you ask around the village square. So obviously, when you do return home at night, there's some really nice conversations with Shenhua that you can experience, and they discuss a little bit about their own back history stories about the fathers and all these different things. Just generally nice conversation, and it's some really great conversation that I do recommend everyone go out of the way to try and speak to Shenhua at the end of each night, especially in the Bailu Village area. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely. There's some really interesting conversations. They talk about Japan. They talk about the village. They talk about Shenhua's life. Talk about Rio's life. It's just very Shenmue. The whole
Mm.
the conversations are very Shenmue in what they do. They just build that relationship. They build that world, and there's some of the best conversations I think in the series. Let alone Shenmue 3 as a whole. I think they are some of the best conversations going in the whole series.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's just great. Like you say, it's very Shenmue, and it's what we were expecting to get from this game, is those sort of conversations, those long-winded, very interesting dialogue, and I think they did do a great job to get some of that into this game.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that.
So obviously, at this point of the game, it's still kind of like tutorial mode. So on your way down to the village, you stop off at the martial arts dojo called Martial Hall, and here you train your kung fu, and it's kind of like forces you into a little bit of a fight with Red Tiger or whatever his name is.
Yeah,
It's kind of just to give you a bit of a taste of the combat system.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. It's a tutorial. You obviously get 1 inch punch. He tells you where all that is, and horse stance.
Yep.
You do the bit of the fighting. Although I mean, one criticism I had of the tutorial for the fighting is it doesn't really tell you a lot. It's just mash some buttons.
Yeah, they could have really. That's actually become a bit of a joke, really, to some people. Anyway, that phrasing for the tutorial for the fighting, they probably could have done a little bit better.
It sells the system short a little bit, actually, in my opinion. I know there's valid criticisms leveled at some of the animation around the ragdoll physics of the opponents, etc. But actually, when you dig into the system itself, start stringing combinations together, they're very smooth and they look really, really good. And actually, it's a deeper system than you'd think. I know there's criticisms around the input method, but I think there's a basis there for a very good fighting engine. It's just you just need to take your time to get used to it a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I do see where they were coming from a little bit, because they just wanted to present it to a wider audience, and they didn't want to put anyone off with, Shenmue's technique-y, what's the word, like Virtua Fighter engine
Mm.
required a lot of like technique, and I would say that there's a lot of fights in Shenmue and Shenmue 2 actually that are quite easy. You don't really need that technique side of things, but that is kind of the engine that they had, was the Virtua Fighter engines, which quite a tactical technique sort of system there. So I do kind of understand the reason why they kind of wanted to make it a bit more for everyone and just say just press anything you want, really, see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, and I can see what they were looking for, and it's not far off. I think being a good system.
Mm. So anyway, as you continue walking towards the village, Shenhua will tell you about the next building you see. This is the Tao Get store. So still tutorial mode here. So Uncle Tao runs the shop where you can buy various items or sell herbs there. Shenhua will show you a licorice herb just growing outside the front of Tauget, and she tells you that if you collect enough, you can sell them for cash. He's also got the herb maps outside there that you can use to try and find all the herbs in the village, and it's actually a really good income of money. It's probably easier selling herbs, collecting, selling herbs, than it is to try and to gamble real money realistically. Would you say?
Yeah, I'd agree. You just got to invest in the herb hunting. It's very quick, and actually, you can get some really good money very very quickly for the larger combinations that they've got. Um, it's as the map opens up in Bailu, when you start finding those sort of rarer herbs, then you can start making sort of 300 yuan or 400 yuan a trade, which is is brilliant actually.
It's massive, really. Yeah, considering how tight the currency system is in Shenmue 3. Later on you'll see why. It's there's a good emphasis on trying to save up for some pricier items later in the game. But anyway, as you return to the village square, talk to Mao Yufang at the well. She will tell you that the thugs attacked the Wang household. You'll need to locate Wang Wen to learn more, and she's back at the Taoget store. And once you speak to her, you will learn that her husband, Wang Shiren, scared off the thugs. Shiren will tell you what the thugs looked like. I think Shiren's one of the guards at the bridge, right?
Yeah, he's the guy dressed in blue.
Yeah, he actually wanders off, I think, when you get back to the village, back to the Verdant Bridge, and he's actually attending to some cows kind of on the path back down to Languishan. So that's where you talk to him anyway, that's where you'll find him. He will tell you that the thugs, or what the thugs looked like, and that there were other people who saw them too. Shiran tells you about a Buki with a scar on his cheek that saw the thugs as well. So this is kind of where the Shenmue 3 demo kind of kicks in now, isn't it? Where you're on the hunt for the Buki.
Yeah, it's very Shenmue, isn't it? You start investigating, and the twist on this is actually now Shenhua's with you, the villagers are more open. They're willing to talk to you. One or two of the villagers put their foot in it, suggesting that Ryo and Shenhua might be an item, which prompts a standard Ryo Hazuki awkward response.
Yeah, as you've come to expect. Yeah,
it's very good.
So head back towards the village, and as you cross over the bridge, Ryo and Shenhua will split up again to search for the Buki. You can find him in the village square. If you walk towards the well where Mao Fueng was standing and look to the left, you'll see a small path that leads to two guys standing in front of some games. So there's some sort of there's lucky hit boards, and obviously the Buki guy is the one he's doing the pale toss mini game, which is quite good fun. And the guy on the left is Shuan Shankun, the Buki with the scar on his face, and this is the one you're looking for. And actually, there is an extra little scene in there I think if you speak to him but don't beat him, because you end up having a fight, and then head back towards the Marshall Hall. Ryo notices his name in the Dan listings, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's an extra little cutscene there as well, if you didn't know that one. So speak to Xuan Shankun, and he will ask to spar with you. If you beat him during the sparring match, then he will tell you what he knows about the thugs. So once you defeat him, he will tell you that the thugs also caused trouble for the Buki at the Flowerbird Wind and Moon stand. And this stand's located over in Joy Park, which is by the river near Taoget and the village and the Verdant Bridge. So yeah, again, typical Shenmue. You've just found a new person to try and find out where he is now, kind of thing, like Ryo's detective hat still on, which leads us to the end of the section, actually. So the next one is searching for the Stonemasons.
It doesn't go over, actually, the conversation, does it, with the flower, bird, wind, and moon?
I was wondering if that would come into it next, no?
Because it's what happens when you wander over. So you have to fight with the Buki, you wander over to Flower, Bird, Wind and Moon, and you're told he's not there until the evening.
That's true, yeah. He only starts from after the transition, I think, into the nighttime transition.
7 p.m. So he turns up at the transition, and then you have to play Flower, Bird, Wind and Moon to get your information out of him.
Right.
And you have to beat him.
You have to win as well, yeah.
So depending on how lucky you are, depends on how many tokens you spend, which is, I think it's almost like a tutorial into the gambling system that they've got, which is addictive in its own right, to be fair to it. And then you get the information from him that the village, that the thugs were seen over in the Sunflower Grove, which is where the next day kicks in.
Right, brilliant. So yeah, they missed that off the other walkthrough. So that's basically the end of that first day of Ryo hunting around, and well, that might even be your second day actually, because it is the second day, wasn't it, that, because Rio's headed home and yeah, after finding Lynn's father or whatever. So this is the third day now, depending on how fast you're playing through the game anyway. So the next day, Rio will need to head for the Sunflower Grove. So where is the Sunflower Grove? Go back down into the village square and walk towards the far side where Aldier's house is, and you'll see a signpost nearby that shows that Manuan Temple is to the left, Panda Market straight ahead, and the Sunflower Grove is to the right. So yeah, nice little village, really, isn't it? I mean, it's they kind of I know they block off certain aspects of the village. They don't just let you just run around willy-nilly straight away. You've kind of got to open up these extra sections, and I think it does work in a way of introducing the player to each section as you reach them in the game. Doesn't make it too overwhelming, and kind of introduces them quite nicely, actually.
Yeah, it was a source of, I think, divided opinion. I mean, I was quite open on the forums, etc. The first thing I was doing on playing Shenmue 3 was finding the arcade games. Little known to me that they're stuck in bloody Panda Market, and you have to sort
Yeah,
of
it's
play
like
a
one
bit
of the last areas.
game through to get to a. It's a minor complaint in my opinion. It's not a massive issue. I mean, I would have liked to sort of had Bailu open from the beginning, but actually, when you look back to Shenmue 1, they wall off bits and pieces early in the game, where and then you trigger going into Dobuita, for example. You have to speak to the gossip gaggle, and I can't remember the name of the lady who's sweeping now, but you can't go to Dobuita till you've done that point. So it's very similar in that respect. So it fits in with the design of the original game, at least. I didn't mind it. I would have liked Bailu to have been open, but I'm not going to sit and die on that hill over it, quite frankly.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like Rio's goal at the time, and it's like he needs to speak to the people in this area
Yeah,
to
yeah,
find out where he should be going, kind of thing. So if you suddenly wander off, it's I suppose on a game's standpoint as well, they would have had to program all this extra dialogue into characters that you shouldn't really be meeting at the moment, and it's extra little dialogue and voice acting and
yeah,
stuff that they
definitely.
could avoid just by walling it off, I guess.
Yeah.
So as you enter the sunflower grove, you'll notice a lot of large sunflowers, obviously on the left. You can walk into these flowers, and there's kind of like a small maze with herbs growing inside. Quite a nice little area, actually. This thing, and some nice new music that plays, I think, when you're walking around the sunflowers.
Yeah.
Yeah, really nice little area of Bailu. Before you can do anything in the sunflower grove, you will be stopped by 4 children who want you to play a game with them. They want to play hide and seek with you. They will go and hide, and you'll have to search for them. You have exactly 4 hours to locate them, so that's 16 minutes in real time. Well, in game time,
Yeah.
16 minutes to find them, and the game actually shows you exactly where the 3 of the children go and hide. So the 3 that we've got here, we've got Le Chunhai, who's hiding in the large sunflower field, and there's 2 openings in the sunflower field that you can use to enter. Enter the one on the right, then look right, and you'll see it standing in the corner. Kong Zhuang, who's hiding behind the large wheelbarrows next to the westernmost house, is also directly across from the location that we found Li Xuanai. Yi Jijun, I don't know if I'm pronouncing any of these names right, by the way, guys.
Doing a good
Sorry.
job, man. Carry on.
Apologies. It's hiding on top of a house. It's the one that's climbed the ladder, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
So from the location we found Kong Zhuang hiding at, continue down the backside of the house. You reach the 3rd house, you'll see a ladder on the backside. Yeah, look up to see Yi Jijun standing on the roof. So the 4th kid so we don't see where he runs off to, is that right? Or do
Yeah,
we?
that's right. The 3 run off in very
Yeah.
Shenmue fashion.
Yeah. And obviously this 4th one that we need to find, Yong Li Hong. So where's he hiding? We've got no clues before the game began, so we must search. So you'll see a path beside the houses. Follow it down towards the river, and you will see 2 children sitting on the dock, Wang Meiling and Zhao Lin. They tell you where to find Yong Li Hong. He's hiding inside the nearby house. So as you approach the door to the house, you'll notice that it's cracked open, and it triggers another cinematic. Rio will notice the place is a mess, and he'll spot Yong Liang hiding. the boy will tell Rio that he saw some thugs come into the house. And then the kid leaves and you investigate the house now.
Yeah, that's right. And you go calling back to the original task, if you like. That's very Shenmue, isn't it? Hide and seek with some kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very, very Shenmue. And you can see Rio's like, for God's sake. Really? Really? But
he's a good sport.
Yeah, he sort of does it. And Kong actually is the grandson of the lady who runs the shop in Panda Market.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. The one that there was a blog post on that one there.
Yeah, and actually that blog post is well worth reading because there's some good information about Kong Senior and her past. It's very interesting. It's very
She used to be a martial artist.
Yeah, a very famous martial artist.
Yeah, famous for movies.
And that's very Shenmue, isn't it? It's that hidden detail that you have to sort of dig around and find. But yeah. Sort of going back to the point of you're in this trashed house, and Rio has to start his sort of investigation phase. And this harks back to the originals, doesn't it? In terms of opening the drawers, opening the cabinets, moving furniture, etc. It's very much like, I associate it with almost like going around the dojo house a little bit.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. So you go and you find, eventually you start finding clues, don't you? You find a list, which has a list of stonemasons on it. And then you have a photograph with Mr. Yuan and Zhu, who's actually the owner of the house, who's also disappeared, for want of a better word. He's just gone and nobody seems to know where he is.
Right, okay. So he is, well, kind of spoilers, heading back towards the end of the game. He's the other guy that's with Shenhua's father then, is it?
Yeah.
Right.
So they got captured at the same time, I believe.
Interesting. So now move over to the other room as well. We've kind of at.
So I've covered that. So you pick up the photo and it triggers a cutscene, as does the list. And you have to leave the house, and you basically, again, it's Shenmue fashion here. You leave the house. Your next task is to ask the villagers about what you found. Now, in true Shenmue fashion, when I played it, and I'm sure you did, James, I used the picture and I used the list.
Yeah.
The guide here is saying you could ignore the picture and only ask about the list of names to progress the story.
Oh, because it gives you the options when you start a conversation, kind of like you say, this Shenmue fashion of which item thing do you want to talk about? Yeah,
exactly that. And so I didn't realise that at the time, actually, but it's always good to know if you're trying to speed run it, I suppose. So you head back to the village square, and you look for the young man in white who is practicing martial arts on the wooden post, or sitting down at the fast kitchen. This is Li Mingyang. You show him the list of names you found, and he'll reveal they're all stonemasons.
Is he the guy that's very cold to Rio then?
Yeah, he is. He really
seems to have a crush on Shenhua, doesn't he?
He's got the hots for Shenhua. He doesn't like Rio very much. And every time Shenhua turns up when he's talking to Rio, his attitude suddenly changes.
Yeah.
It's really, again, it's very Shenmue in that respect.
He's kind of embarrassed.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I better be nice because I've got a thing for Shenhua, but I won't actually tell her. But going back to the story itself, it's the overarching link. We know he says they're all stonemasons. So after you speak to Li Mingyang, Shenhua will appear and talk to you. You will now need to return to Lin's house. If you remember who Lin is, she's the little girl who's drawing in the mud earlier on, and speak with her father, Zhu, once more. They then conclude that the list of names that were crossed off were the stonemasons that were attacked, and that 2 other stonemasons were in danger. So you've got Ki Junhao is the next stonemason on the list, who lives in the Panda Market behind the prize exchange, which is a new area which will now open up for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't say who the other one is yet. But when you travel up the road to Panda Market, Ki Junhao's house is the first building on the left. If it's before 7, no one answers, so you have to head to the prize exchange to speak to Miao Mei. I'm probably butchering this name.
That's fine.
Who will inform you that Ki Junhao will return home at 7 p.m. And then you can fast travel if you want to. And this is sort of a point I wanted to pick up on with Panda Market.
Yep.
And Bailu Village as a whole. And it's a personal opinion, is when you finish Shenmue 2, you're led to believe that Bailu Village is quite rudimentary, aren't you, in terms of they haven't got a lot there. You don't get many outsiders, and you go into the village and you go to Panda Market. I'd expect to see a market in some sort of village like this anyway, because they need somewhere to trade and do all those sorts of things. Because that's how it could well work, bartering, if you like. But I was quite
Yep.
surprised to see an arcade there.
Yeah, well, at the end of Shenmue 2, when you're talking to Shenhua, I think there might even be a question that introduces something about arcade things, and she doesn't know what you're on about. So I don't know if it was actually intended in the original plan, but obviously they've taken some liberties to try and add a bit of mini games and stuff like that. Everyone wants an arcade, don't they? I
I
suppose.
mean, it links to the Kickstarter goal as well at the end of the day, and I can see why they did it. It's another point in terms of whether they could have looked at different mini games for Bailu Village that may have fitted that rustic feel a bit more. But then I would bring it back to yes, but then you've got to design another basically set of mini games
Yeah,
for Bailu, particularly when you're on a tight budget. Is that really what you want to be doing? I don't know. And there's always been this talk around: is there too many mini games in the game anyway? So do you want to then throw more money at it? Bearing in mind you're having to develop this game from nothing. You have no source code or anything, and you're developing. You got to build all this up. So it's just a point that
yeah. I do think Bailu in Shenmue 3 is probably a lot more fleshed out than we would have got back in the Dreamcast days. I feel like
yeah
this was more of a. It's going to be a smaller village at least, and probably not taking up as much time of the whole series as it does do. Obviously, Shenmue 3 as a whole is, what would you say, is about 20 to 40 hours, depending on how fast you play.
yeah
So I don't believe that Bailu Village was going to be this fleshed out and this huge, really, because it's quite a big little area, to be fair. Well, not big little, but you know what I mean. It's uh, as a whole. If you join up all the, once you've unlocked the whole village and you've got all these parts that have become available to explore, it as a whole, it's really large little village, to be fair.
it is, and it's I'm like you said, I'd agree with you. I think I'm sort of led to believe that Bailu Village was a bit of a sort of stop off in some respects. We know where I was training there, and obviously we talk about it in a minute, but it was more a case of I think of just sort of meeting Shenhua, getting to know a bit about her, having a little bit of lore and story around the mirrors. Obviously, that's where the mirrors were made, but the nitty gritty around a WoW and everything that's gone on after he left there, that we're still to find out. So I don't think Bailu in that story arc is particularly important. We just know he trained there. It's more important to the mirrors than anything else,
Yeah.
personally.
Just an extra little point. Do you think that the villager's clothing, for example, is as intended, or do you reckon, when you get off the boat at the end of the last part of Shenmue 2, when Rio gets off the boat in Guilin, and obviously all the little residents there and that little village are kind of like half naked, and they've got that kind of monk style haircut and different, shaved heads and those sort of things. Do you think that was the original look of the villagers, or could you see them wearing jeans and
I mean,
t-shirts?
being honest, no. I think had we got Shenmue through on the Dreamcast, I think it would have been more rudimentary in their clothing. But especially, I don't know, it's going to sound horrendous here, but especially with children and things these days, anyway, that
That's,
do
yeah,
you
I
want
see
to
your point.
have a half clothed child in a video game? I know it's supposed to be representative of the time,
Hmm.
but is that something they had to consider within the game, within the rating, etc.? And then obviously the rest of the clothing, I would have expected to be more sort of rudimentary in terms of their appearance. They might have been a bit scrappy and dirty, possibly.
Yeah, a bit more rural looking,
Yeah,
tribal, and
yeah. But then the costume changes fit in with Shenhua's costume change. I think it was modernized a little bit, but yeah, okay. But then I suppose if you go to Hermit's Nest, some of the older people are wearing those sorts of clothes.
hmm,
It's I don't know. It's a little bit inconsistent, and I don't.
it could be based on like the teams that were involved in creating NPCs. I don't know
Yeah,
if it's, that company,
Lashka.
what are they called? Yeah, perhaps they didn't completely have exact, what would be. What I'm trying to say is, maybe they took some liberties in character model design and
Yeah, possibly.
clothing and stuff. And obviously, Yu Suzuki and his team were new to the engine, new to designing stuff like this. So perhaps they just went with kind of like not placeholder things, but maybe like just easy to use clothing designs rather than trying to recreate that sort of rural village Bailu clothing.
Yeah, possibly. And I mean, it sounds like I'm going off on about what the villagers are wearing. It really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, does it?
No, exactly. Yeah, I just thought it was an interesting point to
Yeah.
discuss.
No, it is. It is an interesting point, and I stand by it. I think had we had a continuation on Dreamcast, I think it would have been a lot more rural and rustic. But anyway, we'll leave that there. I think for another time. But
Yep.
so Panda Market, you go in, and you can fast travel to 7 p.m. to speak to Ki Junhao if you want to. And what he does is he turns around and says his house has been trashed, and actually, as you sort of as Rio walks in, it's a clip from the Magic Monaco 2019 trailer where they're talking. You see this house has been trashed. That's his house. And he says it's the other stonemason on the list is Yi Yangxin, and he's in Rainbow Basin, which is just past Sunflower Grove. So that's it for that day. You can't sort of trigger anything that at that point. You then have the option to sort of go around Panda Market and sort of dive into the mini games. Wacky Mole is addictive. I'll leave that there. If anyone watched the stream on the other Friday, you'll get my point. And then you go back to Shenhua's house. So then the next morning, your task is to head for the Rainbow Basin to speak with the final stonemason on the list, Yi Yangxing. Where is it? So it's just past Sunflower Grove. So you go back to Sunflower Grove, you follow the road past a small pond, you reach a bridge, and that is Rainbow Basin itself. And when you arrive, you'll see two people attacking this woman, and it turns out that the two thugs that everyone's been describing to you, and it zooms in on the tattoo,
the guy with the spider, yeah,
on his head, and you have to fight them both. And this makes a point actually of saying if you haven't practiced your kung fu yet to raise your attack, then this fight's going to be very, very difficult. So part of the mechanic of this game as a whole is you need to train your martial arts, you need to train your moves, etc. And quite rightly, because you're not going to get better at martial arts without training. And so you have to do your one-inch punch, you have to do your horse stance, and you have to buy moves and level up your moves and all of those things to get your attack power the way that it needs to be. Once you defeat them, their boss turns up. We don't know his name at this point, but he's that big Mongolian wrestler dude who was voiced in the English dub by Brad Venables, who sadly passed away this year.
Yeah, that was a shame, wasn't it?
And I actually think he did a really good job with it. And I didn't realize
definitely.
how big a name Brad was in voiceovers as a whole. So it was like, oh wow, And obviously it's very sad to hear that he passed on. But you can't win this fight. You will always lose this fight. So whether you smash him and get rid of his health, or you get your ass kicked, the sequence happens.
It's kind of harks back to Donu, doesn't it, a little bit, where
it's
unwinnable fights.
Yeah, it does.
From Shenmue 2.
So that's, again, sort of in keeping with the previous design a little bit. So you wake up in Yangxing's house, his mother helped you out, and she's a little bit amazed, actually, that you sort of bundled in to take on these guys. Standard Ryo Hazuki.
Yep.
As you do, just walk in and try and batter some people, and then realise that actually, I'm in trouble here. She reveals that he went to the Hermit's Nest to hide from the thugs, where when he learned they were targeting the stonemasons. You now have to go to the Hermit's Nest. So where is it? So it's behind the Panda Market. So you go back to Panda Market, you head for the other side, you'll see a cowshed. And before I jump into it, if you look to the left and up the hill a little bit, there's another path and there's some other herbs up there. If you're looking for your herb trophy, there's some herbs up there which some people miss. And there's a path which doesn't go anywhere, but I just wonder what would have happened with it. Maybe it's just sort of a path somewhere else, but it's just an
interesting. But it never opens up.
No, it never opens up. So you walk through the area and you get some buildings, almost in like a semicircle, and this is where some of the older villagers live, I think. And you talk to some of the villagers, and they say that Yi Yangxing is in the meeting hall. hall. And the first building you see on the left is the meeting hall, and he's hiding in there. So you knock on the door, you speak with Yang Xin, and he's too scared to come out. So you return to Shenhua's house to inform her that he's safe. And that's sort of the end of that day, if you like.
That's the end of chapter 2, kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So it then sort of springs into the next chapter, according to the guy, which is the Verdant Bridge bit. So you end up going back to Shenhua's house that night, or whenever you trigger it, because you do have the option to go and sort of spend some time wood chopping, gambling, or whatever you want to do, or train. And I would highly recommend you train. So you go back, you have a cutscene at Shenhua's house where they talk about that he's safe and that the next day she will come with you to talk to him. So you wake up the next morning to find a note from Shenhua. She'd left early to head for Ternary Spring. So where is it? Ternary Spring is located just beyond the Rainbow Basin. So you head back toward the Rainbow Basin. You turn left before crossing the bridge. You follow the path up the hill and left through a gate. Keep going until you reach an area with a large tree. The large tree can be considered a cherry tree or a Shenmue tree, depending on the translation and various other
whether they meant it or not.
Yeah, we'll leave that there. And she's sitting under it. Shenhua's sitting under it. So you approach her to initiate a cinematic, and you get your introduction to Grandmaster Feng, and he will show up, and he's the person who mistakes you for a wow because he sees Rio looking at the tree. And I've banged on about this cutscene for I don't know how many episodes. I'm going to bang on about it again. It's one of my favourites.
It is a really good scene, yeah.
It's
I agree.
so Shenmue. It's perfect. And you look at the tree and you see this mark on the tree. And it's where someone's been practicing probably something similar to 1-inch punch or whatever. And Ryo's looking at it, and it triggers a memory of him training with his dad under the cherry tree at the Hisaka Dojo. And Memories of Distant Days plays, and it all sort of kicks in. It's all it sort of tries to punch you in the feels a little bit. And then Grandmaster Feng turns up, and he says, "Oh, wow." And Ryo turns around, "That was my father's name." And then they have this whole cutscene around.
Makes you wonder if Iwao used to wear a leather jacket from behind.
Yeah.
Incidentally, the mark on the tree, I kind of was thinking Iron Palm.
Yeah.
Rio learns off Xiamen. I was thinking maybe Iwao on his journey trained with Xiamen, and he taught him the Iron Palm as well, and that's what he was practicing on this second Shenmue tree kind of thing.
Yeah, it could quite possibly could have been. And it would have been very, very interesting to see that. So the cutscene sort of comes in, and they talk about Iwao being in the village. They talk about Landi, the touch. Long Zhao, as his proper name is.
Yeah.
And Rio hands a photo over with his dad and his training partner, who is Landi's father. And they talk about a little bit about the training there.
I think even the Grandmaster Feng says that Iwao wasn't that type of person to kill someone.
Yeah, and Rio's quite he's quite insistent that he quite frankly doesn't believe his father killed Landi's father, hence the issues here. So that cutscene sort of triggers, and they have a conversation around that. And then when it's sort of finished, if you like, Shenhua says to you, you need to go to Manyuan Temple. What
was the reason for this?
Where is it? She suggests you go to Manyuan Temple by the large fishing pond, east of the bell tower. Now, from what I gather, is she suggests the monk has been there quite a long time, and she may sort of remember Rio's father.
Yeah, might give us more clues.
So Rio goes up there. So when you arrive, you're greeted by the monk who resides there. And just for anybody who's not quite sure where it is, if you go back from Ternary Spring, you turn right, go back through the Sunflower Grove, you end up in the village square again. You walk round to the left of the tower, past Aldier's house, and you go up the hill a little bit, and then an opening on your right hand side, and that's where
it's like is towards the fishing place, if you know where that is.
Yeah. So you're greeted by the monk who resides there. She remembers Rio's father's too, which is fantastic because that's exactly what you're looking for. And she allows you to search around the temple to see the history of it. And one sort of nice little thing here is you've got some of the Kickstarter rewards are on the left-hand side on those
The
what
Edas or whatever they're called,
yeah.
yeah, I think.
So you've got some of the Kickstarter backer messages in there, so you can look at them if you want to. But your main task here is to look around and explore the surroundings. You can find a Sega Saturn in a console in a desk, which
I remember that, yeah.
it's a nice
It's
little
funny.
touch.
Yeah.
I don't quite know how a temple that's been there picked up the Sega Saturn and had the means to play it, but we'll leave that there.
She's got to play a hang-on.
Oh yeah, a little bit of Space Harrier. What she fancies doing. You go.
There's a cat as well, isn't there, on a chessboard, I think.
There is, and Rio makes a point and says, "Oh, there's a cat there. I wonder how Fang Mei's doing."
It's a nice little Easter egg touch thing.
Yeah, it's quite nice actually. It's a little bit of fan service there. So you sort of search around. You end up going to the back half of the room, and you look at there's some photos on the wall. And I think there's three sort of boards with I think it's 6 photos per board, but I might be remembering this wrong. And you look at all the photos, and Rio will notice a picture of the Verdant Bridge. And in the photo, you will notice a familiar design, cough, cough, mirror. And it's the same design that's carved onto the Phoenix mirror.
I think it's funny how they have to... they did the same thing in the end of Shenmue 2 where it does this sort of transition.
Yes.
Big deal of putting the mirror across... As though you don't know what you're looking at. It's like this, the design. Oh, it's the same as the mirror.
Yeah, it's quite funny actually, but it's a nice touch. It
is a nice touch.
And the monk allows you to borrow the photo because you're a WoW son. She had faith in a WoW, so she has faith in you, which is a nice touch actually.
Yeah,
which is nice. She also gives you a note from your father left at the temple. It's a note from a WoW's mother. A WoW to Rio's mother, rather.
What's her mother's name again?
Akeen, isn't it? Akeen?
Yeah, Akeen, that's it, yeah. Akini.
And the guide here turns around and goes, does Rio's mother, or did she live in Bailu Village? I mean, I don't necessarily know
that's interesting.
Theory, but it's an interesting thought.
I never thought of that, to be fair. So the person in the guide, it brings up an interesting point. Would she have lived in the village? We don't know anything about Rio's mother really at all, do we? Do we know that she died, or
we all we know is in a conversation with Shenhua and Shenmue 3, he mentioned that he lost his mother when he was very young. I'm assuming
we don't actually know if he's just been told that. We don't know, do we?
We know nothing about it. We're assuming she's died, but we don't know. So it's an interesting point, and it does beg the question because I'd always assumed that WoW left it there because it was just what you did. You left messages at the temple for your loved ones, your family, or whatever, assuming that she was back in Japan.
Yeah,
but it would be a very interesting swerve or side story if actually she was a villager and a WoW had gone elsewhere to train or murder or whatever, and then he's gone back to Bailu to pick his mother up. They've ended up in Japan or whatever, or that actually she just left. She lived in the village and died in the village. But it's interesting, isn't it? We don't know. I mean, she must have had Rio at some point, so I don't know.
Do we know what the note said?
I can't remember off the top of my head. No, I can't remember it. I think it's something along the lines of "I will be." I'm trying to get home soon. I will quickly.
Yeah.
I might Google it before the end of the show and see what we can get. We've gone off on a side track. It's an interesting point either way.
Just wondering as well, when you see the photo in the temple, does that trigger a cutscene of the old days thing, or does that come a little bit later?
It's a little bit later, so it sort of zooms in on the picture.
Right.
And then it does the whole...
He just recognises the mirror thing.
Yeah. It does the whole mirror thing, and then away you go.
Yeah.
So then that's sort of your main story bit for the day, if you like. But you go back to Shenhua's house. You show her the photo, and she suggests you talk to a village elder to learn more about it, since they were alive when the Verdant Bridge was constructed. Now, I think from memory, the Verdant Bridge was constructed in 1910 from the game, but I could be a couple of years out, so I'm sure
that sounds right.
Someone might correct me. So your next task is to visit Elder Ye in the village square. This time, she actually speaks to you, acknowledges you, but she refuses to answer your questions. So it's time to find another old timer. And you
Is
go,
that because Shenhua's not with you?
yeah, and she's just not interested in talking about the Verdant Bridge, and it's none of his business basically.
Yep.
So you go back to the Panda Market, and you have to speak to Kong Mei. And it makes a little joke in this guide about the gorgeous Kong Mei, because there's a little cutscene or a little dialogue choice turn. If you call her grandma, she won't talk to you.
Granny.
If you call her gorgeous, she'll inform you that she's not that old, but Mr. Su is. And she lets you know that Mr. Su likes to talk about a lot about the good old days. So it's then time to find old Su Wengzhu. He lives on Sunset Hill, which is just east of the Panda Market.
I like this character.
Yeah, he's funny.
He's funny, yeah.
He's a funny old character. So a new path opens up just behind Conway's shop, and it takes you back down towards the bell tower, and another path that leads over to the final area of Bailu Village you haven't seen yet, which is Sunset Hill. So it's now open for you to visit. So now the entire map is open for you, which is great. So you go over to Sunset Hill and you search for Su Wengsu. He lives in the house to the far back left, but actually, as a side point, I think his daughter or relative is in the middle of that area. I think she's at the well talking, and you can speak to her. And she goes, "Oh, I'm related to him. He lives over at this house over here." And she points you in the right direction, which is a nice little touch. And you've also got another wood chopping area, and you've got more sort of gambling bits and pieces, if you like, as well.
And I remember the darts music plays in the little little restaurant there.
Yeah, it's a bit
random,
disconcerted a little bit, but yeah, it is what it is. I would have liked darts in the game, but I suppose
that's true.
It's there in a way. So he lives in the house back at the far left. You knock on the door and you meet Su Wengzi, and this is funny because he sat there on this I think is it a bench?
He's kind of like, reminds me of Princess Leia when she's lying at the end of Return of Jedi, isn't she? And do you know what I mean? With the little outfit,
and he's got this
that kind of
tobacco thing as well, and he's smoking away, and he tells you about a story when he was a boy where the bridge was built, and he witnessed an imperial envoy sent by the emperor himself to enter Bailu Village. And he will inform you that a man named Sun was also a young boy that day when the Imperial Envoy arrived in Bailu Village. And it's now time to search for Mr. Sun, which is probably one of my favourite bits in Bailu itself, actually. I mean,
just wanted to talk about what do you think the whole Emperor thing is like? Because obviously there's been some theory in the past where Shenhua is supposed to be a descendant or an ancestor of this Emperor. And obviously we had that little cutscene, didn't we, at the end of Shenmue 2, where it's Shenhua and we supposedly a mum and dad, like a real parents. She's kind of like on that swing thing, the baby swing thing over the tree. And in fact, if it's meant to be the same Shenmue tree, which they do say Shenmue tree, and they named her after one of the leaves that falls.
Yeah.
In the background is a massive temple kind of thing, and like an ancient Chinese sort of environment temple thing, which kind of looks, harks back to centuries ago, really old style China. And it's kind of interesting to see that if we're assuming that Shenhua is only 15, 16. So you're talking 15 years since that whole Imperial Palace area is meant to have transformed into Shenhua's house, which is like a kind of rundown shack-looking thing.
Yeah.
So
it is an interesting point. I mean, one of the points that's been made is that the Verdant Bridge being built in 1910 isn't actually all that old, and actually the mirrors were commissioned around that time for the Imperial Envoy. But as you've sort of gone into, that Shenhua has this link to her relatives, to her past, and that temple that you're talking about, as you say, centuries old. So does the legend of the mirrors go beyond the mirrors themselves? That's the question we don't know.
And we know from like the Shenmue Online trailer and also some early CG artwork or whatever, character concept artwork of Shenhua in a sort of like an imperial empress garments, that white garment thing. I'm just wondering if there's some sort of connection there where she's actually from it's not time travel kind of thing, but you know what I mean, she's got some links to her ancestors of the past. There's some strange sort of thing going on there anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot that's unexplained, and I could just see that there's a lot more that I think we will find out as time moves on with it. But it's just interesting that the mirrors are newer than we thought, but we're led to believe there's more behind it. Certainly, this is how I infer it anyway. That there's more than just these mirrors being sat there from 1910. I think there's more going on there, but that's just my humble opinion. But I digress. So the next job is we have to find Mr. Sun, and he's one of my favourite characters in this game. He's
cheeky chappy, isn't he?
He's a cheeky sod, and he doesn't care. It's brilliant. I love him. He's brilliant. So where could Mr. Sun be located? So we go back and speak with the gorgeous Kong Mei again. I love it. She doesn't know where to find Sun, but reveal that he's good friends with Grandmaster Fang. And one thing you also sort of pick up within Panda Market is actually Sun is a bit of a freeloader. He's a bit of a troublemaker, a bit of a cheeky sod, and does what he wants basically. So you go back to Ternary Spring rather, and speak with Grandmaster Fang. He will reveal that Sun's taken up residence in an abandoned temple. And you're thinking, what abandoned temple?
Yeah.
Because we thought the whole map was open. And the abandoned temple is just very well hidden. And it's in Sunflower Grove, and there's a path to walk down to it.
Yeah, it's kind of like part of the maze, really, isn't it? If you find your way through there, it leads to this sort of eerie, kind of spooky sort of area with the temple. I think it starts to get a little bit darker, actually, as you transition into this area, and you start hearing the crows crowing and corking or whatever, and gravestones. It's just a bit haunting, really, that area.
And it's interesting because Grandmaster Fang says, right, you're going to need some wine and buns to go get him out of the abandoned temple. So first things first, you need your wine and buns. So you go to Panda Market. You look for Liska, one that stands in the middle of the market. She sells steamed buns. You can get whatever you like. Great, just get some steamed buns. And you can actually purchase any alcohol that you want from the woman behind the little girl for the alcohol. Again, Mr. Sun isn't picky, apparently. He just likes alcohol.
It's kind of like, again, traditional Shenmue, where it's just kind of like making a quest longer than it could be. Like, you've got to do all these little extra things to get Ryo's next goal.
Yeah. And it says here to buy 3 buns and 3 bottles of wine to save yourself some time. And I would recommend you do this.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Good reason. So you go back over to Sunflower Grove. You enter the Sunflower Field from the first entrance you can get into. Head in, you go right, then left. You go up through the flowers to the area behind the sunflowers. You go up these steps. Then, as you say, it says here they're eerie, and you're quite right.
Eerie steps. It does, yeah.
You've got all these birds that fly away. The temples, it's old, it's run down. So you approach the offering box, you lay down the wine buns, and Ryo hides, but even the guys, he's not really hiding, is he?
It's not hiding like the little kids from earlier.
No, it's quite funny, but it triggers a cutscene, and Mr. Sun sort of puts his hand out very sort of casually.
He must be able to smell the steam from the buns. Yeah.
And then Ryo's like, wait. He comes over, and he gives Mr. Sun will give you 1 question for every wine and bun that you offer him. You ask 2 questions right now. You can ask him about the Verdant Bridge.
That does trigger a cutscene, doesn't it? An old-fashioned cutscene, I'm sure. Yeah.
It zooms in on the photo and talks about the village envoy coming in. He talks about his memories of the envoy. He says that Mr. Su and I think Elder Ye were there as well. He mentions that in that cutscene.
It's funny because you can kind of see who they are as kids. Yeah, they've still got the same sort of moustache and
all the same hairstyle or whatever.
Same hairstyle at least, and clothing.
And the other thing you can ask him is about martial arts, because actually what Grandmaster Fang also sort of alludes to in your cutscene previously is they are actually training partners. So Mr. Sun is actually a martial arts master, and he shows you the powerful kung fu move called the body check. He only shows it to you at this point. He won't teach it to you because he says you're not ready for it, you're too slow. And it's interesting that he's sort of going on this training arc, and he's like the drunken master. He reminds me of Shun Di in Virtua Fighter.
Yeah,
he's that drunken
master.
Style.
Yeah,
So it's quite a nice touch actually. And I'm skipping ahead a tiny bit here, but if you go back with the third bun and the third bottle of alcohol, you can trigger another question where he talks about a wow's time in the village, um, training the village, his training partner, and they suddenly disappeared. It's all just stopped. They didn't.
Hmm.
They left the village all of a sudden. So it's a nice little snippet into actually more the older villagers tend to remember a wow being there, even though they don't give you a lot about it. They remember him being there, but they don't say how long he was there or anything like that. So it's
Yeah, well, that's interesting that you can do these extra things to learn a bit more of the lore and stuff there. It's kind of like Shenmue. If you go out your way to speak to specific characters on certain days and do certain things, you do learn more about Ryo's tasks and that sort of stuff.
yeah, it's exactly that, and it's exactly Shenmue in every way, shape, and form, isn't it? If you take the time to find these things out, you get some nice little tidbits here.
Right, Matt, shall we have a quick music break, do you think, just before we
Yeah.
continue?
Let's have a
Say
quick
we're about halfway through, actually, which we're
yeah.
doing pretty well here. So we'll have a quick music break here. We're going to play a song from Richard Cartledge now, and this song is 3-6 from Shenmue 1. Okay, so that was a piece of music from Richard Cartledge. Like I said at the start of the show, in the news section, go check out his YouTube channel. He's uploading loads of different songs, basically recreations of Shenmue's iconic tracks, and it's well worth a subscription there to keep on top of all the little music that he's putting out. Some great stuff there. So let's continue our overview, our walkthrough through Bailu Village. So we've just seen Mr. Sun, well, Grandmaster. Well, we actually told that he's a grandmaster, but he's a master of martial arts. Son, he shows Ryo the body check move. So the next thing we do is return to Shenhua's house, and she alerts Ryo that the thugs were spotted over at the Hermit's Nest, and this is the area where Yang Xing was hiding. Yang Xin, he's the who's he again?
He's the stonemason. The last stone.
Right. How did we know he was hiding there again?
Because we went to Ki Jung Hao's house, and he said that he was the last stonemason. We then went to Rainbow Basin, had the fight with the Mongolian wrestler, and his mum picked Rio up and said that's where he is. And then we went over to Hermit's Nest, knocked on the door of the village
Yeah.
meeting hall, and he's holed up in there.
Fair enough. Okay, so Shenhua will accompany Rio as you head for the Hermit's Nest. So even though it seems urgent, you can actually stop and do other things if you want to. Obviously, there's side quests throughout the game, which we're not going to touch upon in this little walkthrough guide here, but we might cover the side quests again in the future. But when you arrive at the Hermit's Nest, you'll find the two grunt thugs. These are the blue spiders, are they called?
Blue spiders.
Yeah, the blue spiders, yeah. So these two thugs they're beating up the old folks that reside in the Hermit's Nest, and this might be the first QTE of the game, right?
Yeah, it is. In fact, you're quite right.
So, solution here. I don't know if we need to say this, but it's circle and right, and it's actually quite a funny scene. Actually, if it's the one where I think there's a guy. He looks like he's taking a piss, and Rio taps him on the shoulder, and he stops what he's doing to turn around, and it's quite a cool little QT cutscene.
Yeah, it's quite good. It's very good actually, and the fail state's quite funny because if Rio gets it wrong, the guy sort of just looks at it and just
he looks down. I think looks down at us. Yeah.
Oh.
So after you've taken down both thugs, you'll lure out the boss thug, who was we had a name for him actually, didn't we?
We do. His name's Yangling or Yanglang even.
Yeah. And you lure out the boss thug and try to take him out by surprise. This fails, and you now have to fight the boss thug again. Like the first time that you fought the boss thug, you can't actually win. So even if you do beat him without taking damage, you'll get knocked out by him again. So it's like a kind of recurring theme here. These are a lot of unwinnable fights throughout Shenmue 3. It's kind of putting Rio in his place, kind of. He's kind of got a bit of a cockiness, actually, Rio, I feel like, in Bailu Village, whether that's because he's been taught by all these masters on his journey so far, and he thinks he's actually better than he is, and his guard's kind of down, even though he's supposed to be keeping his mind like a clear, polished mirror, as it is. But he seems to lose into some of these larger thugs quite easily.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And because he's so headstrong. It's right. He's not thinking straight. So I know there's criticism around Rio has forgotten everything. He's taken out all these people in the previous games, but actually, you're not going to beat every person you come across in a fight. You're going to have to work out actually how to take these people down. And Rio, by not being calm and being able to analyze a martial arts style, Rio can't at this point do it. He can't think clearly to look at the weakness of a martial artist, and this is why he's being beat. It's not really talked about in the game so much, but that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, and also obviously game mechanics. You can't just beat everyone from the start, otherwise it'd be so easy, wouldn't it? You've got to lose and overcome some of these defeats. So when Rio wakes up, he realizes that the only way to defeat the boss thug is to work on his kung fu and find someone who can help him. Again, this kind of happens later in the game as well. It's kind of a recurring thing. You just need to build your kung fu. So your first stop will be at Martial Hall. This is a dojo full of kung fu warriors, which we experienced a little bit at the start. Like I say, that 4 sort of tutorial, and you are recommended to keep going back to there to train your kung fu.
Yeah, exactly. And it's part and parcel of if you get into the routine of the game, you're sort of training gradually anyway. So if you aren't quite powered up enough now, you have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, it says something quite funny here in the guide. Rio plus the 5 of them could easily overpower the boss thug, but unfortunately they will not help. Again, game mechanics.
Yeah.
So they must not care that Yang Xing's life is in danger. Oh, that's just a funny thing. So if you haven't already practiced your kung fu, then this is the time to do it. Make sure you max out your endurance by completing all 7 stages of both horse stance and 1-inch punch. It's quite fun mini games, to be honest. I mean, perhaps not all in one go. So if you progress with, do them as a daily routine kind of thing, you'll get there in no time. And you should also work on your attack power too by sparring people and mastering the move techniques that you can level up. And I think Mr. Tao sells a couple of extra moves and stuff that you can go by and train.
And you've got
get them maxed
And
out.
you've got the economy system as well. So if you're picking up herbs, you pick up toy capsules, you can trade them in to the pawn shop at Panda Market and get extra moves as well that way.
Brilliant. So since the martial law was a bust, let's try Grandmaster Feng. He is, after all, a Grandmaster of Kung Fu. He should be able to defeat the boss all by himself, but once again, Yang Xing's life doesn't appear to be that important.
I love it.
It is true, but it's part of the game, isn't it, really? So after being turned down by Feng, Ryo will remember the body check move that Sun showed him. So let's now go bring some wine and buns to Sun again. So if you've already bought them, you don't need to worry about that. Just head back to Mr. Sun and see if he'll teach us the move.
Yeah, and this sort of leads into the body check segment of the game. It's sort of, this harks back, in my opinion, to sort of the 80s kung fu movies a little bit, where you're training, you're getting ready for the final fight, if you like. But it's quite cool. So you've arrived at the abandoned temple. You've got some wine and buns. He'll pretend to hide again. We'll define hiding in that, but there we go. He will agree to teach you the move. Someone will agree to teach you the move. It's a Baji Kwan signature move called the body check. If and only if Ryo is willing to bring him some 50-year-old Lao Zhao. So,
just incidentally, I think with it saying the Baji Kwan signature move called the body check, if I'm not mistaken, is not the move that Yu Suzuki got kind of hurt and broke his ribs when he. Because if you don't know, on PhantomRiverstone.com, and we published it in the Shenmue World magazine as well, these are an ongoing series of Yu Suzuki's research trip to China from like 1993 kind of 4 kind of era, just before he started working on Shenmue for the Saturn and ultimately the Dreamcast. Obviously the story in his head, but he, on his journey, he went to a lot of the places that Shenmue covers, like Hong Kong. Well, not Hong Kong, but I mean in China, he went to Guilin and all these different parts of China. And on his travels there, he did encounter a Baji Kwan master, and he got really quite seriously injured as he asked the guy to actually demonstrate the move. He wanted to feel the force and impact himself so that he knew what to put into, I think, Virtua Fighter 2 at the time. And obviously it kind of continued into Shenmue here. I think this is one of the moves that he must have really rated himself, rated quite highly, body check, that he puts a whole story arc of this move.
And it's cool as well, because if you remember in Shenmue 2, Zhuing teaches you this Demon's Triangle, although it's not in the game in Shenmue 3, unfortunately, but that's part of the Baji Kwan martial art as well. It's nice, and obviously you start to see that he's building up these signature moves, and sort of going to the Virtua Fighter era. Obviously, Akira, it's one of his signature moves within the game as well. And for those of you who sort of followed Shenmue through, he obviously started his Virtua Fighter RPG with Akira as the main character, and his martial art style is Baji Kwan. So those links are still there. It's quite nice to see. So at this point, you're thinking, okay, how hard is this going to be? And you have to start finding your Lao Zhe, or I'm probably butchering that, but never mind. So you go to the shops. Kong Mei's shop doesn't sell it. You go to the alcohol shop in Panda Market, doesn't sell it. So you have to go to the Tao Get store, which is back near the Verdun Bridge. You go there and ask Tao about it, and he'll tell you to look around to see if there's any. So when you enter the store, you can go to the right back corner, look down, there's a large basket with a lid on top, look at it, take the lid off, you find the wine in it, and it has a label on it. And the price tag is 2,000 yuan. Now,
is it 2,000 yuan if you play it on Nightmare? I feel like it might be 5,000.
5,000. I know the reverse body check 5,000 in Niaowu, but I think it's 2,000 here on Nightmare. But I have to confess I'm not 100% sure, but I'll assume it is for this. Now, if you've sort of engaged in sort of jobs, etc., then it's not too difficult to earn money. This is where you need to sell your herbs. This is where you need to trade in your toy capsules. This is where you need to chop some wood. It is a contentious point in the economy system in the game. I know some people found it quite harsh. Even Ryan Payton, in the interview I did with him, talked about it being quite a harsh economy. So it's just something that I think divided opinion a little bit. It's one of those things. I think if you engage with it consistently through the game, it's not so bad. But if you don't realise where this is going and you haven't got much money, then you've got a lot of work to do in terms of fishing as well and wood chopping and all the rest of it. But I will say Shenmue 2 does this twice as well, with the $500 to meet Ren and the $500 to get the first fight of the 3.
Yeah, Rod Stunt or whatever. Yeah.
So it does do it twice. If buts and maybes, it's probably a discussion for another time. So we're going to assume that we've been good and we've engaged and we've done all this sort of stuff. And we have the money because Rio's loaded.
Yep.
You buy it. You go back and return it and hand it over to him. And then Mr. Sun will now ask you to catch chickens. And you have to catch 10 chickens. Now, this is fun. Yeah, the guy says good exercise, test your QTE skills. And the QTEs in this game are notoriously hard. Some of them are really tough. I mean, I did this on hard mode when I played the game originally, and I would have between a third and a quarter of the time left. I've done this on nightmare mode, and my God, my controller, I don't know how it's still in one piece.
So the time is even more limited.
Horrible. But so the QTE is you have to run to the chicken, you get a quick QTE of either triangle, square, circle X, or Y, B, X, A, depending on the controller you're using. You press it, you pick the chicken up, you have to catch 10. Job done. So after you caught the 10th chicken, you're told to go home and come back again. And you're sort of sat there going...
It's like a slap in the face, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, thank you very much. I'll go away. And you have two options here. You can either fast track it and go back home, or you can do some mini games or whatever you want. And the guy makes a pocket.
Just read that, yeah.
Yang Xing's been in enemy hands for how many days now? They really don't care about it.
It is true, but it's Shenmue with a real time system, I suppose. There's been elements of that in the past, really, where you can funny about waste days opening toy capsules and stuff while you're supposed to be hunting for landies long gone.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? But yeah, you just sort of you look at it and go, it's Shenmue, you nod and carry on, don't you?
Yeah.
So the next day you can return to Sun and hope that he teaches you the body check move. This time he will get you to practice the horse stance. So you must complete the round of training to do the horse stance. And then he will get you to do the chickens.
It is good though. I know it was annoying at the time, and obviously, like I say, it's a slap in the face. But it's Shenmue, it's concepts, it's Yu Suzuki trying to instill this patience aspect into the game, and obviously, Mr. Sun here, he's trying to encourage Ryo to keep his focus, kind of like what Shuing was doing in Shenmue 2 as well, where you'll get there eventually. You just need to be patient and learn this patience. It's an overarching theme, really. Yeah,
it is very much so. And so you do that, and then you're told, right, sod off, come back the next day. And actually, it makes a point here. I didn't realise this. On day one, you catch the chickens by using square or circle, but on day two, it introduces the third button, so you have to press triangle. I didn't realise that. Okay.
No, I didn't actually. So, and then as the day after, it introduces the X as well. Then.
Yeah, so it does it again. It makes it harder. So after day two, you can go back home, or you can do what you need to do. And the guy again makes another jab at it, but we'll leave it there. And the night bit of this bit is interesting, actually. Ryo and Shenhua start talking about what he's doing, and Shenhua's trying to pep Ryo up a bit, because he's obviously a bit depressed. He's not learning this move, and he's got a battle to save Yang Xing's life because no one else is going to do it, it seems, in this village. So they start talking, and Ryo starts sort of talking through what he's learning. And he's saying, the chickens, it's how he's obviously teaching me to move quick at a low base. And the horse stance is obviously the stance for the move. So he's slowly starting to twig. And it goes back to that point you just made, James, that it's building, it's patience, it's making those links to the bigger goal, if you like. And it's very Shenmue in that respect. So third day, you go to return for his help. And this time, instead of horse stance, he'll ask you to do the rooster step, which is a new martial arts mini game you get introduced to at this point.
Yep.
So the concept here is to use the right analog stick to control a straight line protruding from the center in like a set area. As Rio walks around the circle, you basically have to follow him. And it's sort of teaching him steps, but I'll come to that in a minute. So you follow it around, you complete the task, and then you'll then have to. I don't remember. It says here, I might be wrong. It says here you have to catch chickens straight away, but I thought he got you doing horse stance as well.
Again, possibly, yeah.
I think he has you doing horse stance again as well. I can't remember completely. My memory's a little bit hazy there, but we'll assume.
And that was in one of the trailers as well, where it looks like he's whacking Rio with a stick, kind of.
Yeah, it's
how he's like telling you to do the.
He's got his stick out. He's got it leveled out. It's the Magic Monaco 2019 trailer again.
Yeah,
that one. Assume he does horse stance. Then you catch the chickens. You have the added fun and games of X added in. So it's now 4 buttons. So it's really, it can be. So once you catch the 10th chicken, he then agrees that you can be taught the body check. So the first step is to dodge your opponent's attack and circle around them to strike. Rio will do the dodge automatically when you perform the move. Then the body check is completed by a QTE sequence that appears on the screen, just like when you practice Kung Fu by sparring with people. And you have to press them in order. So it's pretty quick as well. So for the benefit is triangle, circle, X, square, circle.
Yep.
Which is really tough the first time you do it. But luckily here, if you fail it, you just repeat it. And
it's one of those action QTEs where it stops and goes.
Yeah, harks back to Shenmue 2, doesn't it, in that respect?
Yeah.
And then after learning the special move, he then tells you why it was bought to catch the chickens and all the other bits of training that you've done. And he also says that you can't, martial arts shouldn't be half baked. The body check, you've only just learned it, so it may not be as powerful as you would be anticipating, and you need to keep training, which is a common theme through all the Shenmue games. So you now have an option here. You can go straight to Hermit's Nest to save Yang Xing, or you can wait and do something else, whatever you want to do. If you're not trained up at this point for the fight, I would suggest you do some training first, because then you go into your fight with Yang Lang. So you go over to the Hermit's Nest, and it's boss thug fight time again, and to try out your new move. So as you approach the Hermit's Nest, a cinema will play. You beat up the 2 thugs that you've beaten up before. So if you've maxed out your Kung Fu, you can dispatch them pretty quickly in a free fight. And then once you've done that, the boss comes out. Yang Lang comes out, voiced by Brad Venables, who I've mentioned before. And you have to fight him in a free battle. Only this time, you actually have to beat him. So if you lose, you have to repeat the fight, basically. Yeah. Now, if you've leveled up your moves, it's not too hard. But what I will say is he is quite tough in some of the sort of his hit damage is quite significant. So you need to sort of hit and move with these sorts of fights, this sort of fight at least.
And imagine like Nightmare mode's probably even stupidly hard.
It's quite tough.
As a boss fight. Yeah.
If you haven't trained, you take some damage off you pretty quickly. So once you've beaten the boss thug, cinema will play, and you'll use the body check move on him. The QTE appears on the screen. The action QTE appears, and then you flatten him with the body check. And it looks really to be fair, it looks really, really good.
I like how you stab him in the thing and it goes doosh, doosh, doosh on the screen, like, that proper harks back to Shenmue 2, with the kanji symbols that appear on the screen kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really nice. And actually, you send him flying. Bearing in mind, the guy's quite a big guy. For Rio to sort of generate that power for it, I don't know, it's quite a nice touch. It's quite nice. Now, it then goes into another cutscene where Rio grabs him, like, right, what's going on here? And there's another QTE, which you just have to press right on your D-pad or analog stick. And actually, what's happening here is Chai, who I forgot turns up at Rainbow Basin when you fight the thugs the first time because he's sat on the roof. Chai tries to hit you with a baseball bat. You get the QTE right, and he smashes Yang Lang in the face with the baseball bat on the floor.
So is that trying to say that Chai's working with these blue spiders, do you think, or is he his own separate entity?
It's weird because it's not, at this point, it's not really alluded to. And I'm not totally sure with Rio's reaction to it, whether he's just, oh, it was him again, or it's almost like he's forgotten who he is. Because bearing in mind, Rio has counter his elbow assault, not counter elbow assault. He's used the normal elbow assault to smash him into the sea in Japan. He's then thrown him off the boat in the boat chapter, which obviously is the comic for anybody who doesn't know with the Xbox version, as you unlock at the end of the game.
Yeah.
So you think he'd know who he was by now.
Yeah, it is a bit weird that. I mean, I don't know whether or not the Chai is just shoved back in for fan service, really, just because he's kind of like a iconic character that a lot of people wanted to see again, kind of thing. And obviously, like you say, the comic, we do know he's still alive, but at the end of the comic, he's defeated again. So I don't know. It's if you were just playing the games. Chai should really be a shock, like how are you still alive, kind of thing, because he's been smashed into the water, and a lot of Shenmue fans thought, he's been defeated, he's dead or whatever. And then suddenly see him again. I wanted that kind of reaction from Rio, like, holy crap, it's Chai again, kind of thing. But he just doesn't really know who he is.
I mean, what I will say, actually, in terms of Chai, the model and everything, actually, Chai's model looks really, really good. I thought it was one of the better models in the games, and actually, his animations and the way he moves is spot on. He's Shenmue 1 Chai in terms of the movements and all the rest of it. I thought the model and the animation here was very well done. So
the voice actually isn't too bad either, but I just feel like the voice is a little bit. Maybe a little bit too unintelligent sounding. Like in the first game, obviously you can have proper conversations with Chai in the cutscenes. Rio's proper talking to him, and he's got quite a lot to say in the first game. But in Shenmue 3, he comes off a little bit like dumb, like me Chai kind of thing. It's
a bit funny. I don't know why or what the sort of thinking was behind that, really. But I agree. I agree with what you're saying there. I do think that, considering he talks about wanting to work for Lan Di in Shenmue 1, you'd think that there might have been a bit more possibly around why he turned back up, how he turned back up, and what his sort of end goal was. But I mean, that also might come into budget, cutscenes, etc.
So he's still kind of working for Lan Di, it seems. Does he know? He knew in the first game that Rio's holding the mirror, the Phoenix mirror.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see. Again, that's not referenced either, so it's funny, but it's something that I think they could have developed more. But they know this. This has been talked about through the interviews that I've done, and sort of things have been in the press with Yu Suzuki as well.
Because it would have been quite interesting if we'd learnt a little bit more about Chai and the fact that he's been following Rio this whole time still. So in Hong Kong, he followed him to Hong Kong, he's followed him to Kowloon, you never know. And he's always been lurking in the shadows.
Yeah,
and he's followed him to Bailu Village.
So it's interesting. I'd like to have seen it fleshed out more, but it's a shame. But again, it's not. It's not sort of a hill I'd sort of plant my flag on and go, this is a disgrace or anything. It would have been nice.
If you think of the DLC, the big boat in Niaowu, the casino-y looking boat thing, there's actually a little bit of a, I don't know if it's an Easter egg kind of thing, that it looks like Chai had smuggled himself in on that boat.
It did, didn't it?
You know, in the bottom where the fat kid is, there's like a little secret passageway room kind of thing under the ship's docking area, and it's this little bed and a photo of Chai again, I think, or something.
It's interesting, isn't it, how they did that? But yeah. Anyway, we went off a massive tangent.
Oh yeah, as we do.
As we do. So you've defeated the boss. Shiren and Leo turn up, and the gatekeepers that you met before. They tie the boss up while the other grunts run off scared. Yang Zing is now free at last. Yay, his life is now saved. He has not been killed over 6-7 days of training.
And everyone's happy.
Everyone's happy. The guy makes a point. So how many days or weeks was he held hostage in your game? The rest of the town just went on like nothing happened while Rio worked hard to rescue.
It's true.
Oh, it's so tongue-in-cheek.
Poor
I
Yang
find
Shin.
I find it really funny. I like it. Poor man. So the next part of the game involves Rio, Shunhua, Leo, and Shiren interrogating the Thogbus, whose name is Yang Lang. You have to ask him about each of the 4 subjects on the screen: his identity, his boss, his objective, and Yuan. After each time you ask him about, you learn absolutely nothing. And this is a very interesting bit coming up. Shenhua will then request. I really leave her alone with Yang Lang. And everybody's like, a bit like, are you sure about this? Yeah. And they go, and she's like, no, it'd be fine. And while you're waiting outside, you hear Yang Lang scream. And when you enter the room again, he will be visibly scarred and carrying his chair. So the query here is this discussion point: what did Shenhua actually do to him?
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's one of the few times in Shenmue 3 that kind of it could introduce Shenhua's powers again that we saw at the end of Shenmue 2, where she's magically raising daisies or whatever, dandelions, and magically getting a floating sword to go in, all this sort of stuff that we're still not sure what's the thing with Shenhua, like who is she, what's going on with her. And this just adds more fuel to that fire, really. Like what's she done to change this dude's mentality in such a way that he's visibly scared and carrying his chair, kind of thing.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it almost talks about like mind powers. Because the cutscene, obviously, I think it has half her face in it, doesn't it? And her eyes change, and then all of a sudden he starts screaming at you. And I'd be very, very interested to see where they take that, because there's another point in the game with Niaowu, which we'll touch on in probably another episode, where it's implied that she does something very similar, but we'll leave that there. It's an interesting point. I think it probably harks back to her sort of mystical powers that have been talked about within Shenmue Online, the trailer there, the fact that we know she can relate to her ancestors in some way and contact them. So there's something going on there.
Some sort of mind power.
Yeah, well, it's interesting anyway, and I think I'd love to see it fleshed out in Shenmue 4. So we go back to, obviously, you ask the same questions again, and he'll spill the beans, basically, which is great. So it turns out that he was hired to capture Mr. Yuan. He wasn't going to reveal who his boss was because he was scared of them, because of they'll basically kill him. Which
Landy?
It could have been, but we don't know at this point. It's not mentioned. They don't mention names too much here. I can't even think if the Chiyu Men is named explicitly here. It might be, but I can't remember. But if anybody's listening to this and can remember the cutscene, do let us know in the comments. So what happens though is he says at the end that Yang Lang will say that Chai is headed for Audier's house. So that then opens up your next task to go to Audier's house. Now, you don't in game; it's considered you have to rush over here, but actually you can sort of do your side quests and stuff as well. It's not time limited. This bit, it doesn't force you to do it straight away. But assume that you carry on. You go to Audier's house, and a cinematic will kick off where Rio will show Audier the mirror. And she will ask how he got it. And Rio says, because my father was killed and I got this mirror and it's brought me to this village.
She kind of feels it, doesn't she? Because, like we say, she appears to be blind, so she's kind of feeling the design of the mirror, and she immediately kind of knows what it is, doesn't she? It seems.
Yeah, she straight away knows what it is. She always intrinsically picks it up, which is interesting. And then she invites Rio and Shenhua in, and she says, right, you need to find 6 tokens in my house and go up to the bell tower.
Yeah, it's kind of like 5 Stars Corpse thing, isn't it? With Yuan Dazu's room at the top of the Ghost Hall building, where you've got to search under pots and that sort of stuff for these tokens.
Yeah, very much so. And the guide we've got in front of us tells you where they all are.
It's pretty good.
So it's quite handy if you can't find them. But the way I did this, I just literally worked in an anti-clockwise direction, just around the whole room and everywhere, and I picked them up that way, so I didn't miss them. So I'm not going to go through it like now, but that's how I did it, so you don't miss them.
Yeah, it's interesting, the designs of them. You've got Alcohol, Moon, Dragon, Crane, Sword, and Fist, which obviously play a bit of a role in a minute.
Yes, they do. So once you collect all the tokens, another cinematic plays, and Audio will instruct you to climb the bell tower with the 6 tokens. Now, depending on what time of day you do this, I think if it's past the morning, you have to come back the following day, which is worth noting. But once you go trigger the bell tower section, this is the point of no return, and the game will give you a message to say, have you done everything in Bailu Village that you want to do? And if you click yes, you then climb the bell tower, and it then takes you on to the bell tower quest. James, did you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, you can hold off the story for now if there's any loose ends that you want to tie up. Obviously, these side quests in Bailu Village, but even they're quite time based. So you may have already missed some that are linked to certain aspects of Rio's story up until this point. But there's probably a couple that you can maybe do just before you trigger the bell tower sequence. So whatever you're satisfied that you've completed everything, you want to continue with Bailu Village, and it's time to climb the bell tower. And this is kind of the thing that's always been iconic in Bailu Village, kind of just this sort of ancient bell tower there that's Rio kind of immediately sees as he entered the village square at the start. It's it's like the backdrop to Bailu Village basically. And in fact, it was something that I tried to try and climb at the start of the game. I bet everyone tried to see if they could climb it, and now it's actually open now. So once you climb the bell tower, you'll be faced with a puzzle. So on each of the 6 corners is a picture with a slot underneath it. I'm trying to think what the puzzle is. So you've got 6 tokens. Oh, it is the one where you use the tokens that you found from Aldier's house. Okay, so you've got to insert them in the correct slot. It is rather easy. I know it does require a little bit of thinking to see that the token matches with the picture. So obviously you've got the hand slot. So the matching kind of token is the fist. The phoenix slot. The matching token's the dragon, which makes sense, dragon and phoenix. The turtle slot matches with the crane, which I think could be kind of... I don't know if there's other theories that I've heard that are like there's actually 4 mirrors, and there's like a turtle and a crane design as well. I'm not sure. But I know there was possibly, or I'm trying to think, what was the Yuanda Zoo, the 4 things? There was a phoenix dragon. Was it a crane? And a tiger?
Yeah, and... I'm pretty sure they're related to the heavenly beasts, aren't they? These.
Yeah, that was true. Yeah, incidentally, whatever. I may have heard that incorrectly, but yeah, turtle matches with crane, and then you've got a shield slot with the token, obviously sword and shield. So you use the sword shield, the sword token, sorry, and then you've got the sun slot, and obviously that matches up with the moon token, and finally a funny one, the buns slot, obviously matches with the alcohol. Wine and buns. So if you put all six tokens in the correct slots, this now lowers a ladder for you to climb up. So you're advancing up the bell tower. So on the upper floor, you've got another puzzle. So there's like a sort of like well, it calls it a wheel repository kind of thing in the middle. And it's got 6 sides, and each side has an image on it. Each of the 6 sides has an image that represents both the token and the slot it went into. There is, however, one picture that does not represent a token or slot. So you can identify it easy because it's the only picture that has a slot underneath it. So you look at the pictures and initiate a cinematic, and your next step is to move the large object either left or right in the correct sequence to unlock it. So you got a piece of paper from Aldier's house that's got the solution on it, with the exception of one step which is kind of worn off, or is it got an ink smudge or something on?
Yes, an ink smudge.
Yeah. So that's the solution to the puzzle, which is circle, 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 square, 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 circle, circles. That's just like turning it in the direction that was on the actual piece of paper with the solution. Obviously, you have to guess the last one or the last couple or whatever. So if you do it correctly, it reveals a scroll. It's kind of like the whole thing sort of opens up and the scrolls appear. I don't know if you can remember a little bit more about the scene, Matt. There's
scroll appears, they grab it, and then I think
does it kind of like vibrate as like the bell tower, like
yeah, it does. It sort of vibrates a little bit, and it pops open, and then they because they use a sword of, it pops open a slot for the sword of 7 stars. I think
that's right. Yeah, so that's where we use the new dagger of 7 stars that Rio slides into the slot. I think because the slot's got
it's got the symbols on it.
So that the symbols, like the pattern of the sword on there, so that's a telltale sign to use the sword, and then you get the scroll. So you take the scroll back to Aldier, and there's quite a nice cutscene actually where she's looking over the scroll and says, what is it kind of like? She sees the elephant sort of rock thing, doesn't she? I forgot what it's called, the elephant sort of rock that's synonymic with Niaowu, and that's where she instructs Rio and Shenhua to head to next, basically.
Yeah, exactly that. And she gets Shenhua to talk her through the scroll, because it also makes reference, I think, briefly to the Cliff Temple as well, but not a whole lot else. But the sort of the Elephant Rock is the next part of the journey, if you like. And she says, "Oh, Niaowu is where you need to go. You need to go with Rio to Niaowu." So that's quite a nice. It's very, again, it's a very Shenmue cutscene, isn't it? You're sort of finding all this information out now about what's going on, where people are off, and where you're going to next.
They're just following this trail of clues, really, aren't they? Like, there's no other rhyme or reason to head to Niaowu apart from that they've got the scroll that depicts Niaowu. So, that's why they've recommended to head there next, because they've got nothing else to actually go off of.
No.
So yeah, and then as you leave Aldier's house, you've ambushed by Chayu. You were told earlier that he was heading over to the house, so it took him a little bit of time to get there, but he showed up now, and actually have a QT year just to defeat him. And then after you defeated him, Rio interrogates Chai and learns that the missing stonemasons are actually taken to Niaowu. So not only were you heading there anyway because of the scroll, you now have an actual goal that the stonemasons are to be found in Niaowu as well.
Yeah,
And that's basically the end of Bailu Village.
it is. And you get, once he's interrogated Chai, you get the sort of transition cutscene where I think, I'm going to try and remember, the prophecy is being spoken by Shenhua, and
Yeah.
Rio is at martial hall and he's practicing martial arts. He's practicing away.
It's actually really nice
night.
cinematography used here. It's kind of like very typical Shenmue cinematography with the cameras spanning around, and
it fits in perfectly with the cinematography used in the other games. And my one criticism is give me more of it because it's lovely, but again, it's really it's expensive to do this sort of thing, which again comes into your budget, of course. But it's very Shenmue, and then Aldier says, "Right, you need to go to Niaowu," and it sort of, you've got Rio and Shenhua looking up at the moon in the bell tower, and the camera sort of pans up, and then it sort of fades away, and then you kick straight in. You have the loading screen, then you kick into the Niaowu opening cutscene, which I think we will cover in another episode.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've done well to squeeze all of Bailu Village into this single episode. I hope you've enjoyed listening to that sort of an overview guide of Bailu Village as a whole, basically talking through that whole half of the game. And if you do watch this podcast on YouTube as well, make sure to add in the cutscenes and all the little bits and bobs of what we're talking about, which is a kind of nice thing to follow through with the talking we've just done.
Yeah.
So yeah, well done, Matt. That was really, really good to go through the game, actually. I mean, if you think about it, think about the story points as a whole, I suppose that the major story aspects of Bailu are in search of Yuan, finding out that he's been kidnapped along with other stonemasons. The next goal is learning about the history of the Verdant Bridge, the Emperor. Some nice cutscenes there, finding out that your father trained in Bailu Village from Grandmaster Feng, and then learning the body check move from Mr. Sun to be able to defeat the guy that's kidnapped another stonemason, who then informs you that Chai's on the way to Aldier's house, which is ultimately where you figure out the bell tower stuff. So, I mean, story-wise, it's typical Shenmue, isn't it? It's like detective trying to find out what's going to happen next with these overarching story elements as well.
Yeah, it very much is, and it just fits into the themes of the first two games in terms of its play style and in terms of just everything what you do. I mean, I've said this before. I think if you play Shenmue 1, 2, and 3 back to back, they fit perfectly in terms of the way they're presented, which is a really big compliment to Shenmue 3, given the 18-year wait that we had. And Bailu Village for me I love it. It's one of these areas. I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it, but it's just a place I really like to be.
Yeah, It is. It's nice. I mean, the whole guilin and the guilin Shenmue 2 flowing into Shenmue 3's Bailu Village. It's as a whole that is encompassing of that whole chapter in the Shenmue story. I don't know what chapter we're up to. Is it 5 or whatever? 4 or 5 or whatever. But the whole of guilin and Bailu is considered one chapter. And I agree. I think Bailu Village, it's a very nicely designed village. Like we said it earlier, it's a lot bigger than I was expecting it to be. And I just think they did a really great job of continuing the story elements there and creating this village for Ryu to explore. I think they did a great job.
Yeah, I think they did a good job with Bailu Village, and it feeds in well to Niaowu and what's going to take place there.
So that was a very good deep dive into Bailu Village there. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. So we're going to close this episode off with a piece of music. I hope you join us again next time, probably in around about a month's time, where we might continue this style and head into Niaowu and do the same talk through Niaowu. Let us know if you enjoyed this episode and doing this deep dive discussion into Bailu Village's half of the game. So we're going to close out with a piece of music. So it's going to be another Kitchen Brothers track, and it's called Fantuanzi. So just wanted to say thanks again, guys, for continuing to listen to the podcasts, to subscribing to the feed, picking up all of Matt's interviews, and obviously these monthly long form discussion episodes of Shenmue in general, with news and everything like that. So I really appreciate the subscriptions and all the feedback on each of the episodes, and hope that you continue listening to us. So from myself, James, thanks, and see you next time, I guess.
See you next time, everyone.
Look at the time.